The Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, December 21st, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dr. Travis Dixon, professor of communications at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, on his most recent report, A Dangerous Distortion of Our Families. Also on the program today, corporate America engages in cosplay, dressing up as Kris Kringle in the wake of the tax deal. Also on the program, DOJ calls for booster seats for deportation hearings. Yep. We'll know tomorrow whether there's a government shutdown, and hopefully soon read DACA, as Democrats seem to have lost their spine in holding the government to account. Puerto Rico governor vows to seek revenge in the midterm elections. UN members threatened by Nikki Haley over the U.S. Jerusalem move. And the Virginia Assembly control will come down to literally picking out of a hat. U.S. life expectancy drops because of increased and continued opioid overdose deaths. And today is going to be, according to astrologers, the worst day of 2017. Save the worst for the last. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. First, before we go any further, we have a little bit of house cleaning to do here at the show. It is towards the end of the year. And therefore, Michael, do you have something to say to me?
I just wanted to say that I think I've never heard an interview with David Dane that's gone better than the one you did. Mm-hmm. I think that Tom Hartman does. They're good, but you're just much better. And a lot of people had tried to do those interviews. A lot of people had tried to do those interviews, but not as good as the interviews you had done. And I think many people had said that your appearance on the media with Bob Garfield, people were they're usually nervous. You weren't nervous. You did it perfectly. It was a great job, and we just sort of we learn from you every day, and I know I learned from you.
Okay, that's only coming every 13 seconds.
And I just admire your leadership so much, and I think that also I would hope that it just is the best talk I've ever heard. And frankly, everyone's saying it. Everyone's saying it.
I would just add, you said you were going to do that, and you did it, and we admire you more for it.
You had said, because you had said that everything the way that happened with Mike Cernovich, you had said that would happen before it happened. And it happened exactly as you called it.
That's
it's
true.
like you're scripting. It's like literally there's a board that you have in your mind that only you see because of your leadership capacities. We can't see it. We can only follow your lead.
That's true.
We're barnacles on your ship. And you're just, we all just are better people because of it. So I just want to thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to say I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And you're
Jamie,
better.
Do you want to lead us in a Wiccan prayer?
Oh, it would be my honor. The longest night has come once more. The sun has set and darkness fallen.
Right.
The trees are bare, the earth asleep, and the skies are cold and black. Yet tonight we rejoice in this longest night, embracing the darkness that enfolds us. We welcome the night and all that it holds as the light of the stars shine down. Blessed be, praise Sam Seder.
I was going to say I didn't hear my name in it.
No,
earlier,
blessed
but
be,
that's okay.
blessed be Sam Seder.
Okay.
Blessed be.
The one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters.
Yes, folks. Needed to get that out of the way. I didn't want 2017 to go by without me receiving my praise. Praise be me. This is.
Okay, but one thing that I would like
I got to say, I actually do feel a little better than I did at the beginning of the show.
I noted those things. Your body posture has improved dramatically.
It's true.
And if we
Holy crap, my
We're gonna have to move the
sciatica
camera
is
angle.
gone.
Yeah, your sciatica is totally psychosomatic. Obviously, the praise is not going to continue.
Right.
But can we have maybe I would
Well,
like
I'm just going to replay that every day. That's all. That's
Yes,
our new
That's the
opening.
new opening package. At least
put
on
it
the
to
days
music.
I host, I would like a working prayer before the
Well,
show
let's not
starts.
get carried away.
I want more of that.
I think we've done
Bless
enough.
you, Matt.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have put on a little performance, but nevertheless, as talented as the Majority Report players are in putting on such a performance, it doesn't come anywhere close to how absolutely bat crap insane this was. At the Trump cabinet meeting at the White House, the voice you will hear is that of Mike Pence. The camera has been set up right behind Mike Pence, and all you do is see the arms are crossed in such a very, first of all, it's a very strange pose for anybody to have, period. But it's as if Donald Trump is literally hugging himself and just sort of like can't contain himself and needs to keep it in. He's so ecstatic, like a little boy. And here is Mike. Mike, it's your turn now. You get to say good things about me.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Mike, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. President. As I told you last night, shortly after the Senate vote, and I know I speak on behalf of the entire cabinet and of millions of Americans when I say congratulations and thank you. Thank you for seeing through the course of this year an agenda that truly is restoring this country. You described it very well, Mr. President. From the outset of this administration, we've been rebuilding our military, putting the safety and security of the American people first. You've restored American credibility on the world stage. We're standing with our allies. We're standing up to our enemies. But you promised economic renewal at home. You said we could make this economy great again. And you promised to roll back regulations. And you signed more bills rolling back federal red tape than any president in American history. You've unleashed American energy. You've spurred an optimism in this country that's setting records. But you promised the American people in that campaign a year ago that you would deliver historic tax cuts. And it would be a middle-class miracle. And in just a short period of time, that promise will be fulfilled. And I'm deeply humbled as your vice president to be able to be here because of your leadership, Mr. President, and because of the strong support of the leadership in the Congress of the United States. You're delivering on that middle-class miracle. You've actually got the Congress to do, as you said, what they couldn't do with Anwar for 40 years. You've got the Congress to do with tax cuts for working families and American businesses what they haven't been able to do for 31 years. And you got Congress to do what they couldn't do for 7 years in repealing the individual mandate in Obamacare. I know you would have me also acknowledge people around this table, Mr. President. I want to thank the leaders in Congress. Not
so much.
Yeah, in a certain sense.
Mike, now you can get under the table, and we'll all wait.
Remember,
till you're
Mike,
done.
if it's the president, it's not gay. I like how Tillerson's face is
look,
like, he's still an idiot. Still a fucking idiot.
Honestly, I mean, I don't want to diminish how insane this is by joking about it. It is so insane what we're watching and so dangerous. This is the type of stuff that, honestly, if we saw this same video clip and there was some type of, if it was, we're hearing Chinese or we heard some Azerbaijani language, and we would just be sitting here and we could see it printed out. We would laugh and laugh. But this is real. This is happening here.
Those are the only places in the world. I think North Korea, maybe some of the Stans, even Assad's propaganda, from what I've seen, tries to be a little bit more bureaucratic.
Yes, and here's the thing. There's a quality of this that, obviously Trump is doing this, I guess Mao did this too, just to F with people. You're going to show your fealty to me. You're going to show your weakness publicly, that you are bowing down to me, right? That's the whole reason why people get on their knees and put their, and allow the king to kiss the ring. But this is a combination of both demanding that type of fealty to show his own power, and also, I think, desperately needing it. Mike, I'm publicly humiliating you too, but if it makes you feel better, I really do need this. It really does make me feel better.
It's the worst of all worlds.
Yes.
I'm both a sadistic sociopath, and I'm also desperately insecure and needy. And so I just really, with one hand, I would like to completely take away any shred of dignity, sense of self you have, just for my own pleasure. And then on the other hand, I'd also just like to thank you.
Right.
Because I'm a really hollow person inside.
Know that you're a worthless piece of garbage, but also that you helped somebody.
What's the context for that clip? Did he call a press conference just to make him do that?
Cabinet meeting. And it doesn't end there, of course, because, look, it's one thing, and we just played that clip of Mike Pence literally praising Donald Trump in the most shameless ways that is disturbing in so many different ways. The Trump's posture, the look on everyone around Trump of Mattis and Tillerson and what's his face. Not Cohn, but the other guy, the Commerce Secretary,
Wilbur Ross,
and the look, and these are all, they're I think to their core they're not good people, but they're also sane human beings, and so they know what's going on here, and the fact that they're not good people is why they're allowing it to progress, and this is what's so dangerous about this type of stuff. That's
Tillerson's texting his friends at Exxon at a table, what I'm doing to get us tax.
Exactly.
I'm going to say, shout out to Mother for putting that man back together again at the end of every day.
Right.
That cannot be easy.
And here is, of course, when you have something like some type of praise like this, you need to consecrate it by putting God's imprimatur on it. And who better to do that than, of course, Ben Carson?
Because you need the prayer more than I do, I think. You may be the only ones. Maybe a good, solid prayer, and they'll be honest, Ben. Is that possible? So, Ben, we'll ask you to say grace. Thank you.
Our kind Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunities and the freedom that you've granted us in this country. We thank you for the president and for cabinet members who are courageous, who are willing to face the winds of controversy in order to provide a better future for those who come behind us. We're thankful for the unity in Congress that has presented an opportunity for our economy to expand so that we can fight the corrosive debt that has been destroying our future. And we hope that that unity will spread even beyond party lines so that people recognize that we have a nation that is worth saving and recognize that nations divided against themselves cannot stand. In this time of discord, distrust, and dishonesty, we ask that you would give us a spirit of gratitude, compassion, and common sense, and give us the wisdom to be able to guide this great nation. In the future, we ask in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Oh, that's nice.
Where did Omarosa go?
I wonder if Jared and Ivanka enjoyed that, the Holy Spirit. Here's the thing. If God was actually listening to that, and I think you can tell that God wasn't because the White House was not struck by lightning, but if God was listening, he would say, Ben, the debt's going to get $1 trillion greater at a minimum over the next 10 years. And it wasn't so much unity as it was a majority. Wow. You just had a very slight majority in both houses.
So I'm going to take that God and I'm going to interpret it as God sanctified me with holy light and co-sign on everything I said. And that's going to be in my post-presidential, post-White House memoir.
I mean,
suck it, God.
In the middle
I'm
of
more
this,
powerful than
didn't you
you
feel like, honestly, though, in the middle of that speech, like I'm just looking around this room, just sort of like this sense of like, is someone pouring gas into this room? Like, is everybody getting lightheaded? Like, it's just so insane to me that it's come down to that we're watching this shit on TV and it's now become like some type of surreal.
The veneer's off.
Some surreal notion of like, what is that show? The Shattered Glass, the
Black Mirror.
The Black Mirror.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's Black Mirror. It's also a Yeats. I always think of like the worst of us. What is it? Like the worst of us are filled with passion and fury. Like, I mean, yeah, there's no more veneer.
Oh my God.
It is what it is.
The center cannot hold.
The center cannot hold. Well, that's what we've
Apparently
been saying.
not.
What I've
Thanks,
been saying.
guys. Yeah.
All right, folks. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to change
I'm
gears
sure
a little
Russia Gate will take care of all of it.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know what is going to. We're going to take a break. We're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to talk to Dr. Travis Dixon about a report that he was commissioned by Color of Change regarding the dangerous distortion of African Americans in our media.
How about color of my bank account?
I don't think that's in it.
Cash money.
We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Dr. Travis Dixon. He is a professor of communication at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and the author of a new report, A Dangerous Distortion of Our Families, Representations of Families by Race in News and Opinion Media, commissioned by Color of Change and Family Story. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with the scope of the report. I mean, give us a sense of what you surveyed here, and then we'll get into what exactly you were looking for and what you found.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks again for having me. One of the things we wanted to do was to understand how families are represented in the mass media and news and opinion media, I should say, as broadly as possible. And one of the ways in which we did this was by trying to examine the national networks, ABC News, CBS News, NBC, and then also the cable news networks such as MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, and also kind of national newspapers and blogs and websites such as the New York Times, Washington Post, right? And then we wanted to expand beyond that. So one of the things that we did was we looked at some of the larger local outlets, and we kind of divided up the country by regions, 4 regions, and we kind of sampled newspapers and news blogs from the largest 4 regions of the United States, and essentially kind of expanded from there. Then we also thought about how our news environment has changed over the last couple of years, and people are now looking at ideological websites, including right-leaning websites, Christian websites, and so we also included Breitbart and Christian Today in our sample as well, so sites like that. So that's kind of how broad we went. We looked at from 2015 to 2016, about 2 years, and we gathered about over 800 stories for this, which is fairly large for content analysis. The average content analysis is probably somewhere between 300 and 500 news items or items to be analyzed, and we kind of doubled that to try to understand what was going on and to try to also understand a little bit about how different news agencies were treating the subject matter. And we were interested when we began looking at families too. So I described the sample. We also decided to examine families, which is something that had not received quite as much attention in the literature. People have been talking about race and media depictions for quite some time in the mass media, and I've contributed somewhat to that literature over the years. But no one has kind of looked at it from the standpoint of how are family units being described and are there differences in race here. And so we began to ask that question with regards to stereotypical depictions and possibly counter-stereotypical depictions as well.
Is there, I mean, it's fairly self-evident, I guess, but I'm curious if there was, I mean, aside from the absence in the literature of a focus on the family unit and how it's portrayed, is there was there another reason behind why to look at that, or was it simply it rounds out a broader picture that we may have of how race is portrayed in the media?
Right, and so keeping in mind that the story or the study itself was commissioned by Family Story and by Color Change, and they've both been interested in these issues for some time, particularly Family Story looking at family dynamics and race. That became kind of the main question. How is news and opinion media treating this question? And one example of where we've thought about this before, but now thinking about it in the context of families gives us some sort of relevance. There are 2 places where I think that's really useful to kind of consider. One is with regards to welfare and poverty, where we know in the past there's literature that suggests that African Americans are closely associated or overly represented, I should say, as being part of the poor as well as welfare recipients. And political scientists have been able to document this, and other communication scholars have documented this. And what we're finding is when we discuss African American families, the issues of poverty and welfare come up quite a bit. And again, when we look at welfare recipients in the context of families and those who are living below the poverty line in the context of families, African Americans tend to be overrepresented in those roles. Similarly, with regards to crime in news, I've done work and others have done work, Color Change has done work on this, where we found that African Americans are often overrepresented as criminal suspects when you compare their representation in the media to crime reports. Right, and we found this in different regions. I've spent a lot of time looking at this in Los Angeles. I believe Color Change looked at this in New York. And one of the things that we found is that when you're talking about families, okay, in this context, right, if you're talking about the family context, there are news stories that then pivot to this issue of criminality and will bring up the issue of, well, there's African-American crime and it's rampant and that kind of thing. In a way, again, where that African-American criminality is being overrepresented when you compare it to crime reports. So it's kind of interesting to look at this context and see how, even in this context of family, these stereotypical associations essentially get inserted into the conversation.
Interesting. And you did so. And just to tease that out, the theory being that one would imagine it's one thing. I mean, I'm not obviously not being forgiving on this, but it's one thing to have, in a general sense, a overrepresentation about criminality, let's say, or overrepresentation in regards to poverty, when you're talking about general topic stories or stories about criminality or stories about poverty. But to have stories that are about families and still have that dynamic there, that it's and I would imagine there's probably something that is analogous in the context of sports and entertainment as well on some level. But I guess that's for a different study. So the three areas in which you specifically looked were, I should say, I guess the three different perspectives were economic well-being, as you said, the idea of criminality and how that is represented in the context of families, and also the stability of family units. Just walk us through that and give us a sense of, on those three areas, just how over or how distorted the view of African American families are in regards to those three different topics.
That's great. So there actually are four.
Sorry.
And so we left. That's okay. We left out one, and I didn't in my initial comments mention the difference, right? But essentially, and you can go to the report and look at the specific percentages. But what we do for each of these is we look at how often the representation occurs, and then we look at various baselines usually put out by the government to kind of see where how much over or underrepresentation is occurring for each one. And what we find is that there's significant, and we also do, I don't want to get too technical here, but when we're doing sampling, there's confidence intervals and other kinds of things that we're doing to deal with sampling error. And I know that, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to glaze people's eyes over with technical language, but I'm just trying to let you know that, we're looking at that and trying to be very kind of sophisticated and precise with our analysis. But in each case, we find that when we look at poor, those who are depicted as poor, African Americans are over-associated. When we look at welfare recipients, we see that African Americans are overrepresented when you compare that to crime reports. But in addition to that, the one I wanted to mention that we haven't talked about yet, we talked about criminality too, the one that we haven't mentioned is black fatherhood. And one of the interesting things we did for this, I wanted to kind of highlight it, is that we did two things. One, we just looked at pictures of who was interacting with their kids, right? And so we looked at the rates of interaction between black fathers and white fathers and white mothers and black mothers, okay? And so when we looked at that,
interaction
we saw the same
I'm
percentages.
Sorry, interaction with each other,
with their children.
With the
I'm
children.
sorry.
Okay.
With the children. I'm sorry. Just to be clear, I'm sorry about that.
No.
So yes, we looked at their interaction with children, right? So how often were black mothers and white mothers interacting with their kids? And also, how often were black fathers and white fathers interacting with their children? And what was really interesting is there's no real difference in terms of the representation of black mothers and white mothers with their interactions with their kids. But we did find, instead, that there were significant differences between black fathers and white fathers. In fact, it's like half as much. There's a half percentage or 50% drop-off, if you will, of the interaction between black fathers with their kids compared to white fathers with their kids. And this was pretty significant. In addition to that, we also found that pundits, and this is the other thing I was mentioning with regards to our earlier conversation, right, is that if you're talking, let's say, about, let's say the conversation is about police violence or something like that, we often found that pundits would then insert these issues of black father involvement, right, as an example. They would say, well, there's these police shootings, and, that's an important issue. However, the real issue is lack of black fathers in the community, right? That this is part of the real thing that we should be discussing, that black fathers abandon their kids and what have you, right? And so that also came up. And we know that this is a stereotype, kind of an unfounded stereotype. If you look at a recent CDC report, that work says that black fathers are just as involved, if not more involved with their kids than other racial groups, right? So that this is kind of a myth that's regularly pushed by the mass media.
I mean,
when you take those,
this is also, and
I'm sorry,
and I have to say, like, maybe I am, sort of filling in some gaps here, but it seems to me when I remember Barack Obama's program of Brother's Keeper, I think it was called, that there was an implication. I mean, we're always hearing, right, from maybe Barack Obama didn't say this, but I seem to recall it. It was a couple of years ago now, but I also seem to recall like other sort of black media figures, particularly entertainers. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I have this notion of this refrain, sort of saying like, black men, it's important to be good dads and stay with your kids, which enhances and sort of builds this perception that like, oh, black men must be leaving their kids in droves, because you never hear, I don't know, Woody Harrelson come out and say, white dads, you got to be good with you got to stay with your kids, right? I never hear that.
Well, I think one of the things, and this is really important, Sam, I'm really glad you raised that. One of the most important things for the news media to do is to provide data, to provide context for all of the different kinds of things that are being raised, right? And that's one of the things that's often missing. People will throw out assertions. Sometimes the people that are being brought on some of the shows are not experts, and they're just kind of being on there as pundits and representing themselves as if they are experts when they're not truly knowledgeable. And then they throw out ideas without context, without facts. There are pressures on the African American community, and this is one of the important things I should mention, because I've had conversations with others about this. There is a disproportionate. So there's a difference between disproportionate and representation that we kind of have to lay out, right? So there are disproportionate poverty rates in the African American community. There are disproportionate involvement with crime in the African American community, which is largely explained by the way, by poverty constraints and other contextual factors. So there are other kinds of contextual things that are going on, and there are different kinds of family structures and living conditions and other things that exist across different racial groups, across different dynamics that are also out there, okay, that we should also discuss. However, when we talk about involvement, taking your kids to school, doing homework with your kids, having meals with your kids, interacting with your kids, right? When we think about those actual activities that we want, like actual involvement, the time with your kids, that there's no difference in race on those issues. And sometimes people kind of conflate things or misuse stats or other things, or they sub in other kinds of information to say that means there's no involvement. And it's like, no, that doesn't necessarily mean that. And that's partly, we all need to be educated on that, right? We all need to be aware of that. When there was a political scientist named Marty Gillens who did a lot of the early work on poverty and race.
Yes.
And one of the things he used to talk about is how almost all Americans had a hard time with the actual stats of who's poor, and a lot of people overestimated some of these things, and sometimes even black people will overestimate these things when they're talking about other black people. So there's a lot of bad information out there, and I think we all need to get good information and get a little bit more sophisticated in how we think about these topics instead of relying on tropes and stereotypes.
And I should say that we're also, I mean, if I understand you correctly too, you could have a situation where in Massachusetts more people die in vehicular accidents than say Vermont. But the amount that it's talked about would have you believe that everybody's dying in Massachusetts through vehicular accidents, as opposed to just the representation of what's going on there is disproportionate with the reality, and that's really the problem.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
And so,
yes, exactly, that's exactly right. When you think about the poverty rate as an example, right? So.
Let's talk about the delta. I want to talk about that delta where sure. we have a perception of what percentage of people living in poverty are African American versus the reality. I mean, the way it's portrayed.
About 27%. Sure. So about 27% of those living below the poverty line, based upon recent census reports, are African American, which makes them, by the way, disproportionately poor because the country is maybe 12 to 14% African American.
Right.
But on the news, what you find is when we look at poor families, that African American families represent 59% of those families. So that is the misrepresentation, right? So more than half of all the families that we discuss as being poor are African American when we look at the news media, where they only compose about 27% of the poor, according to recent census records. And, similarly, you find that, black families represent about 60% of the welfare recipients in the news and opinion media, but they actually only make up about 42% of welfare recipients, according to recent reports. So again, these are all statistically significant overrepresentations of African Americans with regards to welfare and with regards to poverty. When it comes to the issue of crime, about 37% of those represented as criminals in the news. And again, so what happens here is you have the way we're looking at that is you have a family and a family member being described as a criminal suspect. That happens about 37% of the time in news and opinion media, but only 26% of those who are arrested, or according to crime reports, are African American. So again, that's another overrepresentation. One of the things that I've already talked about the fatherhood information, right. But one of the things I wanted to mention is once we looked at all four of those variables, talk about the stability a little bit here, we looked at those and we thought about in concert, like what were they saying about a family's stability in terms of whether or not a family is contributing to social stability or social instability, if you will. And what we found was that white families were more likely to be kind of depicted or framed as contributing to social stability, kind of the social fabric of America, whereas African American families were essentially being framed as contributing to social instability, right? That essentially, the black family was quote unquote dysfunctional, was dissolving, was problematic, and it was leading to these other kind of social ills in wider society. And so that's another thing that we saw once we kind of culminated and looked across all four variables and other information in the newscast. That's what was kind of being communicated overall with regards to the depiction of black families.
So now, do you have the type of data of that you can break down, and I'm not sure which order to ask this question in, because on one hand, I want to ask, well, why do you think this exists? But I also wonder if there is a distinctions in this data between the type of media, either in medium, if it's different in print, is it different in online, is it different in local television versus national television? I wonder if there's a difference from a geographic standpoint. There's a bunch of different ways there seems to be a lot of different crosstabs here that you could look at. I wonder if there's a difference in politics. Like I would imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine that if I was to look at a sample of 50 stories from Breitbart, it's going to be different than 50 stories from, say, I don't know, HuffPost, maybe. I mean, so where are the important crosstabs? And then maybe in that context, you can take a stab at, like, why does this exist?
Sure. That's a really good question. There's a couple of different ways to think about it. So one of the things that we tried to do was we tried to look at national news media, local news media, and other kinds of outlets, right, the newspaper blogs, and we tried to see who was most likely to show up in terms of the distortion. And one of the things that we can say is there's definitely two answers to that question, right? So one answer is some of the usual suspects were there. More ideological media tended to promote these stereotypes and these tropes quite a little bit more often than mainstream media. So you saw Breitbart rising to the top quite a bit, Fox News, but you also would see CNN up there as well. One that's not seen as quite as ideological as Fox, if you will. You would also occasionally see some mainstream news sources such as New York Times and ABC News and others as well. So occasionally you'll see reporters that are also part of the mainstream press relying on the kind of regular stereotypical thinking that we've been kind of trying to highlight here to promote stories or to run stories, what have you, right? That's part of what happens. And there's like a bunch of reasons why. So now let me tell you a little bit why we think it's happening. There's several reasons why, and I think if you read the report, there's some recommendations as well as some underlying critiques, if you will, of the media that perhaps will lead us to thinking more critically about where we go. But one of them is, and I've talked about this a little bit differently in my own research, but we talk about structural limitations and economic interests of the news media. That is that there are certain structural ways in which the news media is developed so that it's designed to make money, and sometimes making money means that I rely on narratives that kind of connect with someone's stereotypical thinking, and that are easy to tell and quick to tell. For instance, as an example of this, in my prior work, I've talked a lot about the difference between blue-collar and white-collar crime. Well, white-collar crimes are covered in the news, but not nearly as often as blue-collar crime. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is blue-collar crime is really easy to understand. Someone came in and shot this person or assaulted this person and left, right? And it's like, okay, that's the story. And then you immediately, what do you do in the story context? Put yourself in the mindset of, oh my God, what if I was the victim? What if I was a family member? What if I was whatever, right? Whereas white-collar crime requires a little bit more sophisticated knowledge of like banking or other kinds of processes that everybody's not familiar with. And then sometimes the people who are committing the white-collar crimes are powerful interests who might be advertisers. So can you really do that story, and should you really do that story? And it's the hardest story to tell, and so that's part of the issue. There's also something called ethnic blame discourse, which basically says that when you have news people who are journalists, right, as well as the public, but people who are journalists begin to form a kind of a community, and that community is not very diverse, right? So most of that community is white, and so when you begin to think about news stories, you begin to think about them in terms of explaining them in terms of the ethnic other, right? So who's responsible for terrorism? Those Muslim people. Who's responsible for our immigration problems? Those Latino people. That's the blame, right? Goes towards Latinos. Who's responsible for crime? It's those black people, all right? And that kind of thinking and framing begins to find its way into the actual newscast over time.
Sure.
So one of the recommendations in the report is diversifying the newsrooms to try to buck against that tendency to have that ethnic blame discourse take hold, right? So that's another way in which it happens. So and just to let you know, it's not like it's these things happen on A lot of times. Sometimes it's really purposeful, and I believe when we're thinking about the ideological media, it's definitely much more intentional.
Right.
When we're thinking about the mainstream media, sometimes it's just part of these norms that evolve that are kind of right below the thinking. We talk about unconscious bias sometimes in the literature and psychology and in communication, right? That we are so used to thinking about things in this way, we kind of my wife, who's also a professor, calls it TUIing. It's thinking under the influence, right? You just follow that course of action without critically pushing back and thinking, hey, a second, am I thinking critically enough about like what's really going on here, or am I just reporting the stereotypes and tropes that, I've just kind of heard out there that, oh yeah, black people are poor and they're criminals. And
the lack of diversity in newsrooms allows that to happen. I mean, if you have a newsroom where there's no Muslims, it is the idea that Muslims are responsible for terrorism can take hold. If there are Muslim people in your newsroom, they're going to say, well, wait a second. I'm not a terrorist, so it's not really Muslim people. You're not really describing it properly. You need to get more specific, and that's
correct.
And
that's correct, and that's part of now that you have to that's why I mentioned structural first. That's exactly true, Sam. The other side of that is you have to think about the structural part of that too, because there are these economic interests that are also driving those narratives, right? And you have the corporate media that are pushing. Like, I just want eyes on my story too, right? And so, yes, that can help. Definitely diversifying is part of it, but you also have to talk back to the media. So we often talk about media literacy, and one of the things that you can do is if you see those narratives being pushed and you're a viewer or consumer, you can say, and we have social media now where we can easily do this. We can say, that was a bogus story. That was so stereotypical. That was so problematic. I really don't like the way you cover X or Y. And also, you can speak with your dollars, where you can either organize advertising boycotts or speak to advertisers, right? These are the ways in which you assert power, because the corporate interests are going to go to where they think, okay, are there eyeballs here? Can we get the profits by doing this? That becomes what's really pushed, if you will. And both of those things have to come together, the diversified newsroom and the economic interest, to make it in the interest of the corporate media to cover things in a more fair and balanced way.
Now, so Professor, let me ask you this. Now, and this is out of the scope of this study, I think, but you cited Martin Gilens, who I think Gilens did some of the work on just how much some of these youths, particularly I think in terms of economic well-being, are held not just by white people but also black people, and that they also have a distorted notion of this because they consume the media too, and nobody can have a 30,000-foot view of the world unless that's sort of their job on some level. But what are the implications on people's perspectives? I mean, I think that may be self-evident to people when you see that the media in some ways probably reflects people's perspective on this, as well as creating this perspective. But what about in terms of policy implications as well? I mean, I think Gilens was arguing, and I believe it was Gilens' work, that the perception of things like forms of welfare changed when the perceptions of who the recipients were.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so bring that forward to us. What are the implications?
So the implications are huge, and especially where we stand today, post this tax bill. Okay, so and the president's already hinted at where he's going, and I think that the media is probably going to make this, unfortunately, easier for him than it should be. But basically, the Republicans are probably, if I read this correctly, and some of the analysis, are going to go after social net programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and welfare, and other kinds of support programs, and they're going to probably try to racialize it. And what I mean by racialize it is, and they tried to do the same thing with Obamacare, by the way, right? This is one of the things that was pushed by Glenn Beck and others, right, that Obamacare was some sort of entitlement or welfare program or reparations program or what have you for black people, right, that was the way to kind of demonize it. And if you think about like the last year, of course, people realized after Obama's gone, this is actually my health care, and I think I kind of want to keep that, you know.
Right.
And some people were saying, I don't know why I hated it. You know, it's always funny that when I hear that, they're like, well, you hated it because it was framed to you as if it was this black man handing out free stuff to black people.
Right. It came with the Obama phone.
Mitt Romney.
It came with
that's exactly right.
Go ahead.
Exactly, the Obama phone, right? And by the way, Mitt Romney made some. I mean, you know, we act like Trump is the only person who does these things, right? I mean, Mitt Romney essentially said something like this at the NAACP convention during the 2012 election. So, you know, it was racialized in that way, and I think that essentially they're going to try to do the other things, with the same thing with the social network or social net programs. As we move forward, and they're going to have to institute these extreme cuts to make up for the $1.5 trillion deficit hole that they've created with the tax cut. And, you know, the way in which you can get the public to say, yes, get rid of that, cut that, is by saying, hey, that's just being abused by a bunch of lazy, and usually with welfare has been the lazy black people, right? And that's what Marty Gillen's work shows,
right,
that it's usually kind of identified as these lazy black people are taking advantage of you and taking advantage of the American system, and therefore you need to cut their welfare. And that's what partly led that stereotypical association between blacks and laziness that was perpetuated by the news media coverage of poverty and welfare is what partly led to support for the Welfare Reform Act of '96, according to Marty Gillen's work. And I believe that the policy implication is, as we move forward, as the Republicans move towards cutting the social welfare network that we have, that essentially what they're going to do is use those same kinds of stereotypes provided by the media to do that. So that's
right,
the policy implication, right? And people won't
so
think
Donald
of it as,
Trump,
well, wait, that's my social.
Right.
Right. Yeah, they won't think of it as them. They'll think of it as those people who don't deserve, and therefore, I mean, I've actually read some really interesting articles about this among, like, people in Appalachia and other places that strongly support Republicans and Donald Trump, and this idea that you know they're really, really struggling and they could really use the assistance, right? And at the same time, they still racialize the assistance and therefore say, well, no, I kind of want to cut, but I'm struggling, you know?
Right.
It's almost like this interesting conflict, but they continue to do it.
I need my Medicaid, but I don't want the welfare queens who are driving around in their Cadillacs and buying lobster with food stamps to get theirs. And, you know, I think
I think Trump mentioned somebody who had a big old house who was on welfare or something, living next to other people who were working. I think he did this recently. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, I may be mistaken. I think I read that somewhere.
I'd be curious to look at a survey of what people, maybe at this time, we've grown out of it, but if you were to ask people, like, describe a welfare queen, what the surveys would look like in terms of what race that woman would have been. I mean, of
course, it would be a black woman,
right? Of course, and
it would continue to be a black woman,
right? And
that's the danger, policy-wise, that we begin to think of our policy when through the stereotypical lens that's being invoked and reinforced by media coverage, instead of a critical lens. So it's fine to be critical, one way or the other, right, of the programs, but think about it more broadly in terms of how that program's benefiting or not benefiting the American people, the economy, social welfare, all the things that, constitutionally it should be doing, right? We can ask those questions. Those are fine questions to ask as long as we're not looking at it through this kind of racialized, stereotypical lens that's being promoted by news and media imagery.
It's interesting because, as you're saying this, I'm just thinking like, we probably need more reporting on poverty, say, just specifically, so that people have a better sense of just exactly who are living in poverty. But as I say that, I think like that's the context in which you see white people who are discussed as living in poverty if the story starts with poverty. And the real problem seems to be that when the story starts with family, black people get projected as being poor or being criminal or being destabilized, as opposed to that topic being the beginning. Does that make sense? That when you're looking at,
I agree.
I mean, when you're looking at, we're going to do a story on a black family. Well, that means we're going to be talking about poverty, and we're going to be talking about instability, as opposed to we're going to be doing a story about poverty. Oh, now we have the opportunity to talk about white people, because it's the topic that comes first rather than it being sort of like artificially incidental to the primary point of, I guess, entry there.
Right. And one of the things that, I would recommend, and I think is in the report as well, is this idea that, well, what can we ask of the news media? We can ask two things of the news media. One is that their writing and their reporting is proportionate to the reality. And two, that there's more context and facts that are used when reporting on these topics. Right? Those are the two things. We need the context and we need the accuracy as much as possible. That's what we should be asking as consumers, and pushing the news media to do as consumers, because otherwise we won't get a clear picture of what's happening in our society.
Dr. Travis Dixon, the report is A Dangerous Distortion of Our Families. We will put a link to that over at the Color of Change. I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break in just a moment. I should tell you that I guess we're more than halfway through now, December 21st. Astrologers did say this will be the worst day of 2017. Apparently, the sun will appear to pass in front of the constellation Capricorn, just hours after Saturn does likewise. This will cause both of these orbs to line up for the first time since 1664.
These aren't the orbs that Trump was touching in Saudi Arabia.
I've touched the orbs, and I've lined them up. This is according to London astrologer Neil Spencer. He insists that starting something new on this day is ill-advised. Will have long-term consequences. So be forewarned. Maybe today we will not call for people to become a member of the Majority Report. Maybe we'll just wait until tomorrow.
I was planning to launch my Patreon blog today, but maybe
really?
I should wait. Yeah.
I would maybe wait. Wait a second. Matt, did my machine not work? I don't know, Jamie. Maybe I would wait till tomorrow.
Just to be on the safe side.
It's a gridlock alert day because of the holiday traffic that's starting.
Is this astrology still?
Well, no, this is just one more example of what you could be facing.
I was going to say, that's
I'm
traffic
not gonna
report.
do anything today, man.
Well,
it's a bad astrology day.
Manish to nah. Anyways,
womp, womp, womp.
No, I guess that was only there's not enough Jews in this office to understand what
funny.
that is.
It's all right.
Jamie, you don't speak Hebrew, do you?
You're looking at.
Do you know what Manish to nah?
I know it's part of a blessing that you say on Passover.
Yeah, she doesn't get it.
Maybe.
Michael said, I'm not going to do anything today. And I said in Hebrew, why is today any different than any other day?
You could tell the type of joke with his schmucky little face he was making.
I don't know. Patience will not be a priority, especially if we're told we have to do something by our superiors. Oh. And we may be perceived as insubordinate. Be ready to deal with the repercussions of that rebellion, Michael, said Lunar Living Astrology website.
I would just like to take this opportunity to say that I think you did a great job with the Dane interview. I don't think anybody could have done better with Travis Dixon. People have been trying to interview Travis Dixon like that for a very long time.
If you are in Newgrange, in County Meath, Ireland, please be aware that the winter solstice will be taking place at 3:30 to 4 a.m. 15 Eastern Thursday. So, we missed it.
Yeah, totally missed it. We bagged it.
There you go.
Very
Well, that's what
Gentile
happens.
of us.
All right, folks. For those of you who are in a different time zone, or perhaps are maybe in Australia, I think it's another day, become a member of the Majority Report. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, check out TMBS on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Check out our new website. It is we're not quite in beta. We're in post-beta. We're in somewhere between beta and alpha. We're in the delta between alpha, and beta. And, of course, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. What else can I tell you? Tomorrow will be the last live show of 2017, unless, of course, something else happens. Are you doing a TMBS next week?
There's gonna be a TMBS tomorrow night at 7 because there isn't going to be a live one next week because of the vacation.
Okay.
So last 2 live shows of the year.
And we, of course, will have best of shows next week, all next week. So check those out. You will enjoy those. You will enjoy those.
You will.
In the event that some type of big news event happens, like, I don't know, Mueller gets fired.
War on the Korean Peninsula.
War on the Korean Peninsula.
All right, let's not go that.
Jared,
I can totally be like, oh, Mueller got fired. I'm going to go take a hike. War on the Korean Peninsula will ruin my break. So
that will ruin your break. All right, so that's why we won't do that. But I don't know. Maybe if Jared gets rolled up.
Oh, my God. Let's go take a hike and smoke a spliff.
That might.
God, now we're talking great news.
We will. We'll try and put something out. Maybe it'll be a YouTube live stream. Maybe it'll just be another live stream.
If Jared gets arrested, we could just put out a conference call of all of us laughing together. Like, hey, Jared got arrested. Everybody having a good vacation? Yeah.
It could also, I mean, it would also be a great excuse for me to sort of leave the festivities.
Oh, I see your angle. Like, sorry, Jared got arrested. I get to leave my family. Goodbye. Hello. I'm going off to Daddy's private newsroom.
Yeah.
And big news happens, and he doesn't have to deal with anybody in the family.
Or it could even just be, there's a chance that Jared's about to get rolled up, so I've got to be standing by my computer.
Dude, you should have already canceled whatever family plans you had to begin with, because it's always a big if.
It's true. I mean, this could go down at any time.
You got a responsibility.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will play some fun clips, ladies and gentlemen, like Mitch McConnell talking about what is the biggest GOP accomplishment of the year.
Hat tip to Sam Seder on that one.
Right, exactly. It was the development of the moon going into Lake Michigan. It was...
he called you, boy.
Donald Trump quite convinced that he's killed Obamacare. We will talk about that. He is very excited about setting records all over things. And maybe we'll take a look at that doomsday bunker.
That was... Jesus.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920 is the number. Again, you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. See you in the fun half. Folks, we got some breaking news. And it's good news, so we'll do this. The first 6 people who were on trial for the Inauguration Day protests, known as J20 defendants, there are 166 who are set to go on trial. They're going out. They're having trials in groups of 6. So you do the math. That's more than 10. I would say more than 20, actually close to 30 trials, I guess. Somewhere around there, 28 trials. The first 6 went on trial. The trial started, I think, just about a month ago, if I remember correctly. And there were initially, some of the people in this group of 6 were basically journalists. They were taking video of the protests. Originally, these people were charged with, among other charges, incitement to riot. This is a felony count, and the judge, Lynn Leibovitz, threw that out before there was a verdict. So they were not in danger of the most serious of charges. I think the charges included rioting and property destruction and whatnot. One of the key elements of evidence was from those hucksters over at Project Veritas, in quotations. And Project Veritas had apparently sneaked into one of their planning meetings and had them on tape where leaders of these protests were seen. Are you ready for this? Telling other potential protesters to wear comfortable shoes.
Surprise, surprise. To kick with?
What's that code for?
Well, apparently it's code for footwear, broadly speaking. So it wasn't just shoes, it was also comfortable socks. They also did say, hey, don't bring any ID. I guess, I'm not sure what the theory is behind that. I guess it's avoid carrying identification, decline to give your name to police. Because that would make it harder for the police to go after people.
You gum up the works.
You gum up the works. The video did not show anyone discussing plans of vandalism or rioting, so it was clearly evidence that they were going there to protest, which is a shocking event. The idea that someone would protest Donald Trump. Who could imagine? So they were all found not guilty, those 6. And we're going to see over the next 6 months, really, about another 160 defendants go on trial in groups of 6 or 7. And this one, I would imagine, is going to the fact that this trial, the defendants were found not guilty, I would imagine is going to implicate the prosecutions of the other trials. A couple of more, and you may see prosecutors say, you know what? We don't want to be 0 for 166 here. Maybe we should just let these guys go. So that's good news. Very good news.
I mean, the initial charges carried up to 10 years in prison, which is just insane for going to a protest.
And understand that this is the functional equivalent, or at least I think the theory is, on behalf of prosecutors, of like a slap suit. Right? Where it's just basically like, it doesn't matter if we win or lose. We're just going to cause you so much grief and strike so much fear into your heart that the next time you contemplate going out to protest against a, someone like a Donald Trump or whomever it is, just know that going out and protesting, a year later, if you're lucky, you're acquitted after a long, arduous process. So this is part of, this is the way they discourage people from going to protests. This is the way that they discourage people, from participating in the planning of protests, et cetera, et cetera. This is what is known as police intimidation, or maybe government intimidation, whatever it is. And so 0 for 166 would probably be pretty helpful in some ways. So we shall see. But congratulations to those folks. Good for them. And as far as I'm concerned, they're American heroes. Meanwhile, just a follow-up on the Doug Jones, Roy Moore race. Apparently, Judge Roy Moore, and you should know that he's no longer a judge. He was actually kicked off the bench. He's also no longer for the U.S. Senate. He's putting out a WND, that's the World Nut Daily article, How Muslims and Marxists Delivered for Doug Jones. Marxist and Muslim-led groups won the December 12th election for Doug Jones, according to World Net Daily. That's a lot of Muslims and a lot of Marxists who are down in Alabama.
I'm just wondering, like...
And apparently they're distinct groups.
Yeah.
Which is also a surprise.
Which is another interesting part of at least my core brand proposition is that, of course, I'm the synthesis. I'm both obviously an observant practicing Muslim as well as a committed analytic Marxist. And I'm just a little disturbed.
Where's your accent?
That...
your Southern accent.
You don't really know anything about it. Yeah, right. Well, I'm one of the few in the North. I mean, most of our leadership comes from Alabama. So I'm a little disturbed that the best we can do is put a sort of milquetoast moderate like Doug Jones in the Senate. And why is it that Alabama still has one of the highest rates of poverty and sort of white concentrated white capital in the country if we have so much power there? So I want to actually thank Judge Moore for reminding us of where we're really underperforming.
Oh, wait a second. I feel like we're shortchanging World Net Daily here and I can't see the entire article, but if you look at the teaser, it's the activists consisting of Muslims, Hispanics, and mainly black Christians formed a group called the... So, to be fair, it wasn't just the Marxists and Muslims, but it was also the blacks and the Hispanics. And all of these people, it should be illegal for them to vote.
So WorldNet Daily is very sophisticated, and they understand that it's basically everything is a synonym for everything else.
Right.
In the sense that everybody here is actually a black Southern Christian.
And
so that's a good point.
Now, Roy Moore still having trouble with the loss. Last night, he also tweeted out that Doug Jones's gay son is thrilled by the Alabama win.
Well, can we also be fair here? Normally, the straight children of politicians that win Senate seats, as an example, don't care.
That's right.
It's the gay ones that are thrilled because they're gay.
On top of everything we know about Judge Roy Moore, we also know that he doesn't click the links that he shares because The Advocate is a pro-gay publication.
Oh, no. I think he knows what he's doing. That.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I think he's like, the point is
he's like,
that Doug Jones's son is gay and is excited that his dad won.
It's like,
because
Roy
what that
Moore
means. He's going to come back and have all sorts of gay house parties in the
celebration.
Roy Moore found it in The Advocate. He was scrolling on his iPhone, and he was so excited that he was like, "Yeah, get back to your homework, honey. We'll get back to our date in a second. I found this great Advocate article."
I am sort of shocked, and I would be shocked to find out. I got to assume that Roy Moore brought this up during the election that Doug Jones' son is gay.
I think that was brought up a little bit less than you would expect.
I would have expected it to be the primary, the big pitch for voting for Roy Moore.
I'm a pedophile. At least my son isn't gay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of overshadowed by something else. I don't know what that could have been.
Yeah, there's something else on the radar besides Doug Jones's adult son's consensual sexual relationships.
All right. Well, let me get the phone system loaded up here in a moment, folks. Yeah, sometimes you get a little lazy. I mean, this is the worst day of 2017. So only gets better from here, right?
I feel like I'm tempting fate, but today's actually been pretty pleasant so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I was going to say that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that.
Yo, star systems. Today's
ladies and
going
gentlemen.
good.
is there anything more disturbing than Donald Trump? Who is self-contented with himself, I should say. Here he is talking about what an amazing experience was. Now, understand, what's really interesting is to watch never-Trumpers talk about this tax cut, because some of them say, well, I'm really worried about the deficit. But the vast majority of Republicans and conservatives, saying even the vast majority, I don't think captures, it's a near unanimity. They all love the fact that this cuts corporate taxes and the taxes on the wealthiest people in the country 83%. 83% of the benefits of this tax bill go to the top 1%, and all of the permanent stuff benefits the top 1%. That is why the difference between Donald Trump and the Republican Party is really just about tactfulness, circumstances in which they will grope someone, and
we don't like overt racism while we destroy the country.
Right. I mean, overt, or I should say,
definitely subtle.
More overt, right? Like, it's really just a level of overtness.
Yeah, you know what? People should really go back into the Mitt Romney archive, and I feel, Mitt Romney. Point being, it wasn't so subtle with him either.
Yes,
it's just our standards have dropped so much.
Exactly. And so here is Donald Trump surrounded by smiling Republicans. I feel like Paul Ryan's, like, he's smiling so hard. I feel like some organs are going to fly through his mouth. Honestly. Here is Donald Trump.
I have a whole list of accomplishments that the group behind me have done in terms of this administration and this Congress, but you've heard it before. Records all over the place, and that will continue, and then some because of what we did.
Yeah, records all over the place. There it is. And I love how he says, like, the people behind me, vis-a-vis me, essentially. Here is Donald Trump bragging at that same press conference that he has killed Obamacare. That's not exactly the case. He is going to cause the rising of premiums for a lot of Americans who are in the exchanges. That's true. He has successfully opened up perhaps one of the most beautiful and pristine pieces of nature that is associated with this country for drilling at a time where we have massive exploitation of carbon that is underneath the ground, and at a time where the last thing we want to do is put more carbon in the atmosphere. This, of course, is a resounding victory. And understand, this has been a Republican agenda item for decades. This is not Trumpism. This is Republicanism.
Think of it, we haven't even been a year, and we did the largest tax cut in our history. I hate to say this, but we essentially repealed Obamacare because we got rid of the individual mandate, which was terrible. And that was a primary source of funding of Obamacare. And Anwar, so a friend of mine.
Now, I don't know what he says. That's a primary source of funding Obamacare. It is not a primary source of funding Obamacare. It was a way of increasing the size of the risk pool so that people would get less, would pay less in terms of premiums. If anything, the government's going to have to pay more money because premiums are going to go up, and they're going to have to cover more of that in the exchanges.
You know, fact-checking something like that in today's world
I understand.
is like, it's a depressing image. It's going to be like the images of like a polar bear trying to cling to an ice float. Like, you know those like heartbreaking images from climate change?
It's like trying to grab like bubbles that are being blown.
It's like, okay, nice, obviously.
I mean, to be fair, it is going to weaken Obamacare, though.
Oh, yes, without a doubt.
Everyone's rates will go up, and it's going to be a lot harder to get coverage.
Obamacare, And Anwar, so a friend of mine. Oh, congratulations. And Dan, where's Dan? What? No, and
Dan.
Don, too. Where's Dan?
Where's Dan? I'm going to pretend there's a Dan.
I'll tell you, between Dan and Don and Lisa, you've done a very great job. So a friend of mine called up about Anwar. He's in the Opus. He said, you didn't get Anwar. And I said, tell me about Anwar. He said, we've been trying to get that passed. The whole country, the world, they tried in Ronald Reagan. They tried with the Bushes. They tried with everybody. They never got Anwar, but we got Anwar in this bill. So we have Anwar, we have mandate, and we have the tax cut, and we have the reform.
I don't understand anything other than that. My good buddy who's in the oil business called me up and said, thank you for getting Anwar. Like this is the way it works. I did it.
You could literally.
Who's Dan? Don? Anybody with a D?
I think actually the we got Anwar could be the sort of distillation of this entire time.
Yep.
We couldn't even protect. I mean, and by the way, I don't know if John McCain, I don't know if the version of the tax bill that he voted for, it must have already had Anwar because that's how they got Lisa Murkowski's vote, right?
Right.
But that's another thing that I remember when I first was getting aware of politics in the Bush era that he grandstanded on. He voted against tax cuts, and I went and reread this. He voted against the Bush tax cuts partially on inequality grounds then, and he helped lead the Democrats in filibustering Anwar. So just a good reminder that John McCain's a scumbag and totally not committed to anything other than militarism and his own ego, and that should be remembered in all of his obits.
I mean, it really, with John McCain, it always came down to something so incredibly personal and petty. Right. That is...
well, the only part that wasn't personal and petty was the just unending need to escalate military conflict.
Yeah.
Really,
well, I got news for you. When John McCain dies, we're going to spend some time correcting the record because there's going to be so much hagiography when it comes to John McCain. And again, John McCain may have been a nice dad. I don't care. It's not really relevant to me. He's a
really nice dad. He just voted for a giant giveaway to his daughter.
Sweetheart, on my way out, one thing I'm going to do is make sure that the first $11 million is not going to be taxed.
I even jeopardized potentially bombing Libya again in 20 years to give you a gift. That's the kind of dad I am. Hey, Lindsay, you want a picture from the 60s of me to jerk off to?
Can we just dwell one more time on this when he calls Donald Young Dan one more time, just for anybody who might run against Donald Young.
But the best part is like when he goes and he insists that there is a Dan.
Well, that reminds me of the thing. Remember the Puerto Rico thing where he said something like, I don't remember what it was, but I'll just say for now. He's like, and you're from the Air Force. The Air Force would like to speak, and the guy's like something like, no, we're from the Coast Guard. Right, that's why I would want you to speak now.
Right.
Remember that? Like just
Obamacare. And Anwar, so a friend of mine. Oh, congratulations. And Dan, where's Dan? What? No, and Don too. Where's Dan?
Where's Dan? I know there's a Dan. There's got to be. Can we find a Dan? Is there a Dan? Surely there's got to be a Dan around here. You, what's your name? Kevin? Okay. Kevin then. Ends with an N.
He's just so excited. Who can remember names when you're that excited?
Yes. Or who can remember names when you don't actually function like a real human being?
Where's Kunta Kinte?
I don't pay attention. I don't pay attention. So forget it.
Wait, what?
Here is let's just get this out of the way. Nikki Haley, who is on the day that her fellow cabinet members are having to literally lick and boot shine the Donald Trump's his feet. Nikki Haley, who made the mistake of saying that those women who Donald Trump assaulted should be heard, has got to make up for it in some fashion. So she runs to the UN and gonna talk tough. I'm gonna talk tough.
Gotta be
tough. We're gonna be super tough. I'm gonna threat. We're not gonna pay our bills, and this is the perfect fig leaf for us not to pay our bills.
The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit. America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do.
Well.
And it is the right thing to do.
Yas, Queen.
In a collective act of defiance, the General Assembly voted today, or yesterday, I should say, 128 to 9. There were 35 abstentions to demand the United States rescind its December 6th declaration on Jerusalem, the contested holy city, this morning. And, you know, it's not like this is so. I mean, there are plenty of times where the General Assembly votes for something because more often than not, they are on the wrong end of U.S. imperialism. But the sort of the whiny quality of this is just like this aggrievement thing that just feeds. And this is also,
That's
again,
the heart and soul of republicanism.
This is right. And the aggrievement is there, and the antipathy towards the UN. These are all Republican traits. This is not Trumpism. John Bolton, who was who had Nikki Haley's job, and had to get that job when the Senate was out of session and George Bush shoved him in there as a recess appointment, said we could blow up half of the UN and wouldn't make a damn difference. This is the guy who was sent there. So this is Republicanism. This is not Donald Trumpism. This is Republicanism. Donald Trumpism is just a certain amount of groping, and a pulse is basically what Donald Trump is.
An audience of rubes from TV.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, of course, fabulous hotels. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Well, you're not there. Now you're calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 210. What's going on with the phone system today? Hold on if you're on there. Wait,
I'm Capricorn.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is how it starts.
Thank you for calling in the Majority Report.
That part works.
The host will be with you shortly.
Bear with me, folks.
I feel like it will work out.
I am the host.
But I'm a Leo.
We'll see. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? 210. 210. What the heck? This is annoying.
Damn you, Ajit. And Capricorn.
Hang on, 210. I'm going to see if I can just get somebody. Calling from a 847 area code. Who's this? There's something wrong with the phone system. I don't know what it is. Would you get on the horn to Kyle? Callers, just hang on there, please.
Kyle doesn't control astrology, man. Can't. Just got Kyle to take care of that.
Please see if you can IM Kyle and see if there's something up with the phone system. A Square, what a collection of miscreants and Scrooges. But if there's a hell very special place for Ryan Eddie Monster. Finally, Hayes repeated your line that this is republicanism. Jamie unleashed. That was the right prayer for today, girl. And your commentary and insights are biting and fresh POV to help expand the MR reach. Tony, my brother from St. Louis, please check out MR Archives for the deep race and class analysis provided by Dr. Eddie Glaude, Bill Fletcher, Dr. Anderson on White Rage, and so many others. You may decide to become a member. Wyatt Koch. Hi, Sam. It's me again, Wyatt. I listened to the show yesterday and my feelings were crushed. Crushed like an ant beneath my sweaty diabetic feet. My dad said I could spend my allowance how I like. Speaking of which, if your caller from yesterday comes to my yacht party, please have him bring those Klonopins. Wendy, America First, putting out a $1 million ad buy starting Christmas Day called Thank You, President Trump. Shows people thanking Trump for all his accomplishments, including a little girl saying, Thank you, President Trump, for letting us say Merry Christmas again.
They overturned the executive order on that. It's gotten real serious.
It is.
That is the incredible, like, it's just such an amazing operating system that on one hand, like, just this complete ruthless, like, democracy's broken. We will literally, like, rape your children in front of you for, like, an extra, you know, sort of cut on pass-throughs. Like, we will do absolutely anything. And then it's fused with, like, Merry Christmas. Like, just the most petty, inconsequential, posturing, identity-based nonsense fused with, like, just unapologetic 21st century feudalism. It's amazing.
Matt, are you sure we got all the systems go? Oh, here we go. Is that it? You didn't do anything. Calling from a 210 area code. That is weird.
We will literally like rape your children.
Hello, 210. Hello.
Cut on pass-throughs. Like, we will do absolutely anything, and then it's fused with like.
He's a very insightful caller.
He's annoyed by your. I can hear him.
He's making a lot of good points. Boom.
He's just going, God, Michael, stop. Pick up the phone.
He's saying, wow, I don't even.
This is John.
I don't even want to have a laborious conversation with Sam.
210.
Here we go.
I just want to hear Michael.
Is that it? You didn't do anything. Call from a 210 area code. That is weird.
210?
Good afternoon, Sam. Can you hear me?
Hello, John from San Antonio.
Good
You know,
afternoon,
John, let me just say this. I want you to know that I really appreciate.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I want you to know I really appreciate how. Wait, can you hear me, John? John? John, can you hear me? John? John cannot hear me. Son of a gun.
I'm on with Kyle. He's checking it out.
All right, hold on, John. Hang in there.
Good afternoon, Sam.
John, I know you can't hear me in real time. Oh boy, here we go.
We're stuck in a time loop.
Time is dilated.
It'd be cool
Time
if
is
we heard a
dilated.
John from San Antonio conversation, and he actually runs like this major criminal enterprise.
All right, well let's.
No, I mean I can hear you with the 7-second delay.
Right. John,
No,
hang in there.
No.
We're going to try and get it
I can't hear
fixed.
you on the phone. No.
Right. I know. I know you can't hear me on the phone.
Sorry,
It's weird.
we're looking into it.
I don't understand what's going on. Hang in there, John. Just stay on the line, and we will get to there if we get it fixed. Let's go to some of the IMs. Bullprog, thank you, Sam and MR crew, old and new, for years of wonderful and smart programming. The information you've relayed, not just to me, but the entire audience, has increased the intelligence index by a factor of 9. I feel honored.
What about 11?
I was going to say, like, what does that mean? We're not at a 10. The privilege to contribute $10 every month, which, if you follow externalities and trickle-down money, has an ROI that tops any nootropic and cryptocurrency on the market. In fact, the audio from the podcast has stimulated stereocilia growth, and I've actually regained the higher frequencies in my hearing. Thank you for sharing your greatness with the world and allowing us to worship you. Pence's nose is like Trump's seat. Ilmic, I think Antonio Moore would be a great guest. He does a lot of work on black poverty and has a paper coming out with Sandy Garrity coming out in January. I want to get Garrity on too, actually. Send us an email when that paper comes out. Will the UN move to London when Jez's Prime Minister? Georgian Sol. Deputy Prime Minister Damian Green got fired for lying about being a wanker at work. No joke. Sam Skinfolk. Hey, Sam, I have some nice collectibles for sale. Interesting trades accepted. Ryan Tennant. I always wear comfortable shoes when I go protesting fascists. It's purely coincidence. They're also my steel-toed motorcycle boots, I swear. I love Sarah Palin suggesting to Matt for the show, the year content, maybe do a compilation of Trump tweets and scandals that we may have forgot, like Trump telling his supporters to check out a non-existent sex tape of a beauty pageant contestant or a guy calling Obama a bad or sick guy.
Sick guy.
I see Kyle has somehow jumped into the system.
Kyle's a wizard.
Are you, John, can you hear me? John. Nope. Mike Cernovich, your coastal elites conversation yesterday was pretty lame. You really need to think about and refine your positions better. Hint, the term coastal elites is a derogatory label applied by the right, and you guys are just buying into it uncritically. Next, you'll be talking about how real Americans... I agree.
No, I don't totally agree. It just because a term is used by the right in a disingenuous and stupid way.
What do we
doesn't
mean by
it-
coastal elites?
It's a real
Oh, we already
phenomenon.
went through this.
But I mean, are we coastal elites?
As you define it, yeah.
Well, I was just accepting it because that was the context of the thing. But I don't. I mean, I don't. Obviously,
Look, I buy making a sharp distinction between economic and cultural ones, and economic is infinitely more important. But in this terrain, we probably would fit that criteria. And all we're saying, it's like so easy, is don't unnecessarily insult and alienate people, especially in ways that has class overlap. That's it.
Would you say the same about wealthy Republicans in the suburbs who were a much bigger factor than the demographic of, let's say, Sarah Palin, white trash? I'm not using that term. I'm just saying in the context of that conversation.
But
much bigger factor in the win in Alabama.
What do you mean? I don't know.
In other words, the argument is don't be sensitive to those things, which I am. This is the argument. Because there's no point in alienating potential votes. Maybe we'll just get marginal returns on that. But we wouldn't say the same thing about Paul Ryan Republicans who probably, I mean, you have black women and Republican suburban women and men made the difference in Alabama. That's just the fact in terms of data. But we wouldn't be like all precious about, not criticizing those people in those suburbs.
I don't think we're precious about not criticizing anybody.
All right,
I
forget
think we're
precious.
just specifically
Would you
saying,
say? Would you apply the same? Would you apply the same set? The same
but there
perspective?
isn't even like a discourse. There isn't even like a handy word for like, a way of calling like affluent suburban white people dumb people with like bad teeth. Like I don't even see the analogy. Like I think when it comes actually to a chunk of those voters that actually vote Republican, I would consider those people to essentially just be my like political and class enemies, and I think we rip into them all the time. But actually, I will say more broadly, I think that even in areas that I agree with, there's tons of shorthand language that people on the left use, like even certain like white male privilege discourse, which at times I think is actually totally stupid and inappropriate and counterproductive. So in general, I'm sort of allergic, but I think specifically all we're saying, and please jump in too, Jamie, is like that kind of like, oh, people in the Rust Belt are dumb, or Missouri and education oxymoron. It's just a bad look.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's so
No,
complicated.
I get that.
I
I'm
think-
just saying that the argument was that, you don't want to alienate these people because of voting. And really, I mean, people could make the same argument about you don't want to alienate rich Republicans in the suburbs, college educated.
I mean, I think the justification that a lot of, say, coastal elite liberals use for dumping on these people as being white trash or whatever is, oh, these people hold bigoted views, fuck these people. And while that may be true, I think the more that people of our ilk dump on these poor white people for their bad teeth or marrying their cousins or like all sorts of gross stereotypes, these people begin to tie anti-racism and anti-sexism to this kind of snotty bourgeois morality in their minds, and it undermines the very important work that we're doing.
All right, fair enough. I will also say that Christine Todd Whitman said that the reason why Republicans don't buy into global warming is because liberals throw it in their face. So.
Dude, we can do all things at once.
I
agree.
understand. I'm just,
I
look,
agree.
I am just putting an argument out there. So, that's all I'm saying. Obviously, I don't.
Let me make it a little bit more concrete. I spoke to a person after the election who really would be like the total stereotype of, frankly, a very uninformed but thinks they're deeply informed, like affluent New York sort of quote unquote liberal voter, centrist voter. And she was like, Well, the problem is that Hillary and Obama were just way too honest with these people that there's no place for them in the economy. So do you think we need to figure out a better way to lie to people in these states? Because they just don't get it and they're bigots. I mean, it's literally, like, I'm paraphrasing, but that's like literally what she said. And so it's not only is that like, again, a bad look. There's a policy
This is a widespread
portfolio.
viewpoint.
That's a wide. If you go in neoliberal circles, you're saying it's like an aberration. I don't think it's an aberration at all.
No. I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. All right. I went to private school. I know how these people talk. I know how these people think. I know how they talk behind closed doors. Right. And it's not great.
And by the way, when it's with black or Hispanic people, it's actually the same thing in substance. It's just paternalistic, like weird condescending racism versus overt hostility. Like it reflects a much broader problem. And I don't think it's like the spirit of true, true progressivisve. Even if you want to take it real left, like it's just not solidarity.
They don't fit into their worldview.
I think broadly speaking, being nice is better than being mean.
I also have a theory that rich white liberals hate poor white people because they show that there's something more than racism that's holding people back in this country. Their failure to thrive. They want to blame it on the lower classes so that they don't have to blame it on capitalism.
Well, and also I think their general disdain of lower classes across the racial map, it's like comfortable to be like, oh, well, obviously we can talk about white trash that way, but of course we can't talk about, all these other categories of people that are, systemically held down by the economy. And I don't think it's just a question of being nice. I think sometimes, like in the person's case that I'm referencing, there's substance there. She's an advocate of she's a TPP's good and these idiots don't get it. And maybe it's bad for them, but who cares? They're irrelevant. It speaks to a certain attitude, which has real power. Because it's associated with money.
I mean, all right.
Like I've read entire articles written by centrists, whether they're center left or center right, saying that entire communities of people need to die out and or just pack up and move and, go be Uber drivers somewhere. So I understand why people are a bit sensitive about it, and it takes nothing away from us to not do that.
All right, let's go back to the phones. John, can you hear me? John, can you hear me? John? It's weird. Why? Kyle, can you hear me? Astrology, man. It's so strange. Kyle's in there and he can hear John.
I mean, the phones were weird yesterday, too.
Yeah, they were. All right, we're going to go back to... I'm sorry, hang on there, John. We're trying to troubleshoot as we speak. Well, I mean, I was talking on the phone with the guest, and the guest heard me, right? So nothing's changed in that regard. I could do one of those, I could try and call you and see if you hear. Well, look up the preferences. Does it say, the line in is still the... Yeah, I mean, I will double check. That's a good point. Maybe something changed for whatever reason. I don't understand why that would be the case, because... the output is USB, as it should be. Input is line in port. So, I don't know. Vice President hostage. What you guys don't see is the gun Mr. President is mounted under the table. He said if I didn't read exactly what he would, force Mother and I to watch Will and Grace reruns. Trade for Klonopin. I was wondering how one becomes a parliamentarian. What is their background? I've never heard one of them named, yet it seems like they make a huge decisions. Kyle thinks it's something wrong with our setup, but I don't understand how that's the case, how I could have called. Hold on, Kyle. Folks, bear with us. Let me call, let me see. Do you have the sound up here on my computer? Call. Gonna call me. So I'm calling me now. Hang in there, folks. Hello?
Hello?
Hey, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
My phone system works.
works.
It is somehow, I am not calling into the call system. Try it again.
Thank you for calling in the Majority Report. The host will be with you shortly.
And that would signify that I can hear, which we sort of already established. And I go in and... Hello, John. Can you hear me? John? John? John?
Hello?
John? He does not hear me in that conference room. All right, let's bring it down. Nick, the liberal, I believe a large factor in the overrepresentation of poor parenting and crime in black family correlates to the concentration of poverty in single-parent demographics via housing policy and market forces. This creates negative feedback for people trapped in that loop and leads to overrepresented association of crime and race. One obvious solution, less housing segregation by income, which middle-class people oppose with great vigor. Sam's Barnacle, you're the best. Tham Theater. In the delta between the alpha and the beta should be the name of your next book, Tham. Ted Bundy talks. This is Don Jr. Would be a better place if I had never called the hooker. This talk will explore why that's not the case. And I get it. Roman Polanski, thanks for the compliment on my mise en scene, Sam. I'm sorry I wasn't to write. I was on the run. Seventh Slaborn, thank you, Lord Trump. Finally, me and my wife can have children again. Great interview today, says Dryanush. Reminds me of a white guy boss I had who decided unprompted to explain that black gays exist because of absent fathers. Wow.
What about the white gays?
Absent mother.
Kyle, there has to be something with me getting into the room there. I don't know what it is. PJ Boy. White House is tweeting out white replacement memes. What? It's time to end chain migration. There you go. Sam, will you please run for president in the Green Party in 2020? I would love to see Jimmy Dore's reaction to that.
What the fuck am I...
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Join it. Lucky Leo. Word up, Michael. Leos will survive this day of destruction. Oh, wait. I'm on fire. Scarepone. Sam, can I get a shofar, please? I listened on my birthday 2 days ago, but your IMs weren't on. There you go. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, belated.
Phoenix says on Twitter, Sam is basically Exhibit A of what not to effing sound like. I want to smack his glasses off.
Who said this?
Phoenix.
What to not sound like?
Well, he's responding to the previous conversation we were having. So
I'm not saying anything.
Hey, look, dude, I'm not
right.
the one who wants to smack your glasses off. It's Phoenix.
Okay. That's the thing. I'm not saying anything. I just think that the argument needs some work. That's all. Fran from Philadelphia. So sorry if this is triplicate. Hey, Sam, I applaud your man cleavage and pursed lips on your new website image. Oh, okay. But why didn't you use a photo with newer, bigger glass frames? They complement your face much better. Also, I'm trying to put together a little holiday digital gift package for MR. Can you say balls a couple of different ways in a sentence or two? I 99% guarantee it'll be worth it. Balls. 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 Balls.
I like the last one. Or the third one, rather.
Balls. Attorney Andrew, this I am for Michael. In response to your call for clips of Pod Save America stuff, I humble yet unwitting Pod Save America correspondent would be happy to send some of their wonderful highlights from the past year. However, I do need 4 Klonopin to do it. So Kyle is able to talk to John in the live conference.
And Ronald Reagan just messaged me. He said he can hear John clearly, but not us. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, wait a second. He dropped some crazy polls on me. People not in the conference can hear John. All right, let's put it up. John, can you hear me? John. Kyle.
Kyle, hello.
I don't understand what's going on. All right, turn it down. I mean, the audio is getting there. You didn't do anything different when I called my phone, right? Doesn't make any sense. DZ. I just donated my usual year-end $100 to MR to support and piss off Mike Cernovich. Thank you. Your new webpage is handsome, but the facts section looks unfinished. Yes, the website is not finished in terms of all the data that we've entered into it. We're going to get to it, but we wanted the functionality, the primary functionality to be there, and it is. So, collectibles for Clonabin. Yeah, John comes in loud and clear to us. Hi, John. Hi, Kyle. Well, you can't hear Kyle. Producer Lauren, could you explain to the audience why there weren't any large street protests against the Trump GOP tax bill compared to the Women's March, the Equality March, the Science March? I wanted to march against this tax F-up, but can only attract a few Facebook friends. The rest had to do holiday shopping. Would it have been for not like other protests? Also, I'd like to suggest a guest for yes. I mean, I think it's just harder to rally people around taxes as a topic. I think people just had a harder time sort of like wrapping their heads around it. I mean, the tax bill, in terms of polling, was the most negative, most disfavored tax bill or largest piece of legislation in ages. It's just that it was not animating people, and I'm not quite sure why.
I mean, it's also a very busy time of year, not for nothing. And they may have done that on purpose.
I think there was a lot of reasons. That certainly is one of them. This is a tougher time for people to get involved, I think. I think they also wanted to get it done before Doug Jones, to be honest with you. I think that may have there was a number of different. They didn't want to get it out of 2018 just because I think just there's a sense that like it's an election year, so there's a little more temerity. I'd also like to suggest a guest for next year, Jamie's fellow Guardian SAS Chelsea Manning, who apparently is trying to rebrand herself as a cybersecurity expert.
Oh, that'd be a good guess.
Fucking love her.
Maybe you can ask what she thinks of Julian Assange these days. Happy holidays.
Every time I see a tweet from Chelsea Manning, I almost cry with joy.
Just your opinion. The war on Christmas stuff is all self-generated controversy. Obama sent Merry Christmas addresses every year. I think Obama was far more religious and theologically educated than Trump, but many types of Christians refuse to see that.
Many types.
Many types.
Midnight Pizza. Can we start an MR debate club? If so, I motion to make E. Greg our first president, followed by a motion to impeach and interrupt them each time they think.
Happy New Year, Greg. I've been really enjoying your contribution to the show recently. Do you see what I just did there?
Let me see if I can reach John again. John, are you there? John? John? I don't understand. I'm hanging up on me in the, I mean, I've got the right number calling in. I don't get it.
It's not good.
Thank you for calling in the Majority Report. The host will be with you shortly.
Mm-hmm. Alex, countdown to deficit.
John, are you there?
Huh?
John?
No, not here.
So I can hear.
I mean, I can hear you through my speakers, but
maybe try to take someone besides John.
Yeah, try another one.
Hold on. John, are you there? Now I'm in the live call. John, can you hear me? And now I can't even hear John. That's weird. When I was in the John.
Thank you for Majority Report. The host will.
All right, let me try somebody else besides John. John, I'll get back to you. Calling from a 503 area code. Who's this? 503. 503. I know. This is annoying. I'm sorry, folks. No calls today. I don't know what to tell you. The call system is not working. It's not working.
Bum, 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 bum.
Vince Foster. Sam, after considering the surreal nature of things in the news and the present Skype-related time dilation, is it possible these transdimensional UFOs were time travelers in the future Mars colony who successfully prevented World War III by ensuring Trump's election? So the president is technically a Martian asset, and Hillary would have engaged in Obama's Phase 6. Let's see.
Why don't you give out your personal cell phone number, and then you can put them on speakerphone and just hold them up to the mic?
That's possible. That might work out for a moment, and then I think it would be a problem.
What happened?
You might have to get a burner.
What's happening?
Dostoevsky in the sheets. I think calling people white trash is classism. That's the issue. Rich liberals say crappy things about poor populations.
Right.
What is lost is those poor people who don't vote and feel demeaned, not just the white Trump voters.
Right.
Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, guys.
I remember one time being in a friend of mine's mom's car when I was in high school, and I have no clue like how the conversation, how it took place. I don't remember this, and there was no reason to think like my family situation was complicated, and we could present it as, I'm sure, like more infinitely better off than we were. And she was liberal and blah blah blah, but she said something. She's like, I know this is wrong, but I just kind of think poor people are stupid, and that is part of the problem. And I mean, that stung me, man. Like, that really hit. And there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, racism and sexism and to some degree homophobia have been thoroughly sort of tabooified in our culture, which is a good thing.
In this part of our culture.
Classism.
The part of our culture we're talking about.
Yeah, and,
Right.
these coastal elites are also the gatekeepers of culture and entertainment in Hollywood, so kind of control the conversation. But classism is still like the third rail. Like, Americans have no vocabulary to talk about class.
Neither as an actual function, which is ultimately what it is, let alone as just like a group of people that you're not constantly kind of like demonizing. And I remember that moment vividly, and there's a lot of that.
All right, let's try one more time just so that we can test this with Kyle. Kyle, I am in the live call area now. You cannot hear me. I'm going to move into the... I've moved into the call queue now. And the sound is up, right? I mean, this is all up. Nothing. And now I'm going back into the live call queue. And now I hear nothing. Before, at least, I could hear John talking. Now I'm getting to some weird thing. So strange.
You should just text him your cell number. I'm serious.
Well, I can talk to Kyle afterwards. But...
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. I think I just realized what might be going on.
What's going on?
It's something to do with... Well, there's something going on with the way conference members are muted as they go in and out of the live call. And I think something got messed up there, so I will try to debug that, figure it out.
All right. Well,
so I guess it's my fault, is what I'm saying.
What
a surprise.
It is the worst day of 2017, as I started off the show by today saying that what is going on, Kyle, is the sun appears to pass in front of the constellation Capricorn only hours after Saturn does likewise. As you know, this will cause both of these orbs to line up for the first time since 1664.
Rachel, I have a question.
Which is a problem.
Rachel!
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the orb moving through Capricorn account for the fact that you and Kyle have and always will be megacocks?
Kyle, could you hear that?
The answer is yes, and sundown comes for us all.
Yes,
today, sooner than ever.
Oh, big words.
So
big
Kyle,
cock.
can I try and get somebody in the queue now, or no? Do I need to do something different?
I think you just put them in, and it should probably work this time. I think you were actually muted before, and that was the issue. Now that you're not, you should be able to bring somebody in.
Kyle, will you do me a favor, Kyle?
Calling from
Kyle.
Hold on. Calling from a 323 area code. Who's this? Kyle, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear them.
You can hear them? Because I cannot hear them.
No, but they also might be unmuted.
All right. We got to fix this. We'll have to do it afterwards.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry,
Tell your
folks.
girlfriend and mother I say hi, Kyle.
All right,
Thank
Kyle,
you.
we'll talk after the show. Sorry, folks. No calls today.
Don't worry about
Apologies.
getting home in time. Work on the phone system. I'll be there.
Joanna, if we want to bring up economic realities, the blue state contribute more to the federal government than the red state. Red state are the takers. Wooden computers. Jamie grew up in West Hartford. Right on. I'm at the fancy Renbrook private school picking up my nephew right now. And Bonara. Wow, this is truly gripping radio. That's the that's
Mazel tov. I have not gone back there since I was 18.
Job retraining might be worth a shit if there were actually good jobs to get once we retrained. But we believe in the jobs fair in this country, where if you're deserving enough and look like a hard worker, a job will appear. Indeed. Phony shrimp. Phone system's gone back a few decades, huh? I don't get that. Mark in Jersey. Tell Michael he's guilty of generalizing, too. Just the other day, he said the show is geared towards grad students, when in fact, I'm a guy that checked off some college on job applications before I started my own business,
That's
and
a great
I love
point.
both shows.
That's a good point. I need to come up with a different way of framing that. It's a valid point, but it shouldn't be filtered through school.
I wasn't for grad students. It's sort of a grad student version of undergraduate YouTube shows.
Yes, I think he was joking.
No, but I think I like it, though. That makes me think. It's a good point.
I mean, grads.
It wasn't very funny. But
It costs a lot less than a grad school does.
That is true.
Well, we also don't tax on the service in kind. Mark in Jersey, aren't almost all the things pundit says, like black fathers leaving, is a bigger problem than police brutality on Fox? I only hear crap like that from people like Sheriff Clark. As a white man that has never met my father because he was a drug addict, father figures are more important than actual fathers. It's like that old saying, anyone can be a father. Not everyone can be a dad.
Takes a village.
Sewer sock. Sam, you may be the class enemy, but you have faith in democracy. That's rare. Most of these class enemies who consider themselves liberal because they think that makes them smart and moral, but though don't necessarily think democracy works, they hate populism and think we can be lied to. The class enemy is not often very democratic. You're getting cucked by us subhumans. S. Chach. There was a Democracy Now! Piece this morning on Texas police turning over people without ID to the border control. This seems to align with the recent unofficial slowing of legal immigration by the president and the more cracking down on nonviolent, undocumented people by ICE. Are we witnessing an active purge of foreign people from our country in slow motion? How can we fight this? There's no doubt. There's no doubt there's an active effort to do this in a myriad of different forms. I got a hold of a document that was put out by the DOJ. This is a memo from the Department of Justice, the Executive Office for Immigration Review. It was to all immigration judges, all court administrators, all attorney advisors and judicial law clerks, all immigration court staff. This is just yesterday. Was from the chief immigration judge. It was operating and procedure memorandum, guidelines for immigration court cases involving juveniles, including unaccompanied alien children. In other words, this is going out, I would imagine, because they anticipate bringing a lot more children into the court system. And they say that these cases involving children are complicated and implicate sensitive issues beyond those encountered in adult cases. Imagine that. But the OPPM provides guidance for adjudicating cases involving any unmarried individual under the age of 18. It's not intended to limit the discretion of an immigration judge, and nothing herein should be construed as mandating a particular outcome in any specific case. But it basically does tell you, don't let sentimentality or the fact that they're kids really interfere with your harsh punishments. They go on to say, and this is what they're talking about when they talk about the best interest of the child. You want to talk about, what is it, Black Mirror. Issues of law, determinations of removability, and eligibility for relief or protection from removal are governed by statutes, laws. Although USC 1232C2 contains provisions for the Department of Health and Human Services to consider the best interest of the child in certain circumstances. No similar provision exists in the INA directing immigration judges to consider the concept of the best interest of the child as a legal standard for determining removability or eligibility for relief or protection from removal. In other words, you cannot use what is in the best interest of the child as a means of determining the outcome for what you do with these children. It's asking you to ignore what may or may not be in the best interest of the child.
Those kids knew what they were doing when they broke the law.
Although juvenile cases may present sympathetic allegations, immigration judges must be mindful that they are unbiased arbiters of the law and not advocates for either party in the case they hear. They must remain neutral and impartial when adjudicating juvenile cases and shall not display any appearance of impropriety when presiding over such cases. And that impropriety, of course, is like, oh, these are kids. Remember, best interest of the children may exist in Health and Human Services law, but not in immigration law. These kids are pieces of meat. However, we are not savages. We are not Klingons. Immigration judges can and should permit reasonable modifications to the courtroom to accommodate children, such as permitting counsels to bring pillows or booster seats for young respondents, permitting young respondents to sit in one of the pews with an adult companion, or permitting the companion to sit at counsel's table, allowing a young child to bring a quiet toy, book, or other personal item into the courtroom.
You should give the children drawings.
Yes. To help foster an atmosphere in which a child is better able to participate more fully in the proceedings which, I remind you, are to deport them from the country, more often or not to a country that either A, is incredibly violent, so much so that their parents basically said, go, we love you, but we want you to live and not be killed, so we are willing to let you go and live a better life. And or kids who may have been brought here by their parents have no knowledge of the country they're going to get deported to. The nice thing is that they'll be able to look back upon these proceedings and remember, oh, yes, I remember all the nice men and women in the court because the booster seat allowed me to sit and view over the witness box.
Oh, once you go easy on kids, everyone's just going to dress up like a kid.
It's a slippery slope.
You know, put their knees on their shoes.
If you actually acknowledge the humanity of a child, what next? The humanity of an adult?
Slippery slope.
See, that's the problem, is that as you go, oh, there's a cute Guatemalan kid, you forget they're all subhuman. That's the problem.
Now, look, again, they also have the decency to say that, like the courtroom, the robe is a symbol of the immigration judge's independence and authority. While most children will be far more interested in the judge's behavior than the judge's attire, the robe may be disconcerting for younger respondents. If an immigration judge determines a particular case, dispensing with the robe would add to the child's ability to participate, again, in that child's own deportation hearing.
Why don't you dress up as a clown? That way the kid can be happy before they get deported back to Honduras to be murdered by a gang where there actually is security threats from those gangs, not like the ones I've totally made up here. That's the other, incredible, grotesque irony of this is, they've completely inflated the importance of some actually
MS-13 is everywhere.
which is actually a serious organization, and they do real violence. And they're very limited in their role here, though it is a real role here. And he uses it to justify racism and deportations back to potentially neighborhoods in places like Honduras where, they actually do run a neighborhood. And you actually will be killed as a 4-year-old if your parents have pissed them off in any way, shape, or form. I mean, people forget Honduras.
Yeah,
I mean, these countries, their rates of murder and violence compared to and exceed Iraq certain years.
Yeah, largely as the result of U.S. foreign policy.
Well, not only just because of like abstractions, like people talk about and note what you're saying with like the drug war, but even in some cases, there's further arguments specifically that like in most countries, and I need to study this more, but like, you know, juntas and regimes outsource a lot of stuff to paramilitaries. So if you look at like the origins of even these gangs,
of course,
they go back to death squads that were trained in school of the Americas.
Here's the thing.
It's very specific.
Here's the thing. Central Americanism is the mother lode of all problems. That is the problem. Okay, that is it. It is the mother lode of all problems.
I have a thought experiment.
It is a thought experiment. Okay, I mean honestly, is it just a coincidence that the most deadly places in the world are maybe El Salvador?
I've noticed that
Nicaragua.
a lot of liberals they don't have the courage to have an honest conversation about Tegucigalpa.
If people, the reason why
imperialism is woke when it's a woman doing it,
the reason why Jeff Sessions can get out there and talk about MS-13 as if it's the largest, most fundamental problem in the country we have, is because liberals are not out there criticizing all of the Central American children. Because you can let those children in, but do we really want El Salvador in this country?
No, it's a slippery slope. And the problem is that I think there's a lot of really genuinely concerned people out there who really want to have a progressive, scientific-oriented, open philosophy
people say
and governance.
That I am irrationally afraid of people from Central America, I remind them I have critiqued people from South America. I have critiqued Canadians at different times. It's just that Central America is the mother lode of all problems.
And when they say it's a race thing, here is one random person from Nicaragua whose nonprofit I indirectly fund myself from my trust fund, who's on my podcast all the time.
If people can point to a preponderance of cocaine-related cabals that are paramilitaries in other countries, I'm open to it, but we just don't see it. We just don't see it. We just don't see it, right?
We just don't see it.
This is one area where I think there's a very big difference between the base of people who vote for Democrats and the people in power in the Democratic Party, our elected officials. Like, this has been going on for a really long time. It's not just Republicans that do it. I mean, as I understand it, the current horrific conditions in Honduras are at least partly the result of a coup that was legitimized around the world by Hillary Clinton.
Well, she refused specifically to recognize it as such.
As
and said that all people needed to come to the table and it was a very, very like centrist coup. It was like, you military junta people who are acting violently on behalf of like the land barons that run this place forever, and we are our kind of client state patrons, and the guy that they just kicked out of power for like instituting moderate social reforms. You guys all need to figure this out together.
Right.
Yeah, this coup was even too bad for Obama.
He was, but another reason, you know who's involved in the coup? You know who's involved in the relationship between Hillary and the ultra-right Honduran coup?
Oh, yes, I do. It's Mark Penn.
Maybe, but definitely Lonnie Davis.
Okay.
I would assume Mark Penn. Maybe the Honduran junta was like they couldn't afford Mark Penn's quote, so they went to Lonnie.
Very wealthy. They're very wealthy. So, I mean, in the sticks, as a red stater, poor white people think they deserve government aid, but think that minorities are the ones who are undeserving. They think the people who live in the coast don't get real America. However, what they don't really get is without government aid, states like mine would be in financial trouble. The new tax plan will take the shortfall we had this year and double it till it hits them directly in Montana. That will be Medicare, Medicaid, and SSDI payments. Or when the rural hospital closes, they will simply continue to live with their heads up their asses. Well, in these sticks, that is Very elite of you. Really cool. When using a term like coastal elites, it's used as a joke. It's something right-wingers say derogatorily. You said it tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, coastal cities have smart, dumb, rich, and poor. I think Newt Gingrich invented the term limousine liberals. It's supposed to be an insult. We respond sarcastically. We can remember Mitt Romney wistfully when the dancing horses in the car elevators were an outrage. Those were good times. Where's Dan from Anwar? Corvidar, have you checked out the book Politics of Resentment by Catherine Kramer? Yes, we have tried to get her on for a long time.
That woman is like more difficult to book than Obama. I mean, she's.
We haven't tried Obama quite yet.
That would be funny. Oh, sure, I'll do him with Majority Report.
Well, hold on,
as long as it's Michael, not Sam.
Catherine Kramer on yet? Oh, okay, I'll wait for her.
Can't even book Catherine Kramer. Get the fuck out of here. I'm gonna go see Richard Branson.
Andrew, nothing but patience, nothing but love. Witnessing the process is actually interesting to this former geek. You're doing fine. Citizen of the world. My grandmother died today. Can I get a sad shofar? Well, I can do this.
You really want it so far? That's sad.
Hopefully she led a long and happy life. I appreciated your Manish Tana joke, Sam. Keep up the good work, you guys. Thank you. Disco Stew, yesterday's conversation on gettable Trump voters, to the extent that they exist at all, their numbers are negligible and not worth pursuing. They're motivated by cultural resentment, so universal policies aren't appealing to them because they help those people too. Like Sam constantly says, the number of Bernie to Trump voters was minuscule, so the failure of Bernie's universal program appeals to get Trump voters proves this. Sorry, Jamie, but they are deplorable, and it's ironically the most real thing Hillary said all campaign.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I don't understand. Like, this line of argumentation, there is not a single person, Jamie nor I, who is saying that for a second the racist, xenophobic, and all the rest deplorable appeals that Trump ran on and who most of his base voted on should be appealed to for a heartbeat. All we're saying is that, first of all, okay, negligible, I don't know what you mean by negligible, but negligible is 100,000 vote difference in those states. That's a different election outcome. That's number one. And then number two, go back to the New York Times piece on African-American voters that didn't vote in Wisconsin. And yes, voter suppression was a big part of it. And the other part of it was it meant a lot that Obama was president, but 8 years later, economically, we're even worse off. And Hillary did not motivate us to get out there and do it. And they could be right, they could be wrong, whatever. I'm not interested in litigating that. Most people, I'm sorry, they're not going to read platforms. They're not going to go into detail.
But that's a different.
But I'm saying that no, it's not a different thing, because the general notion of not running elitist, means-tested campaigns has big implications for, even if it is a marginal couple 100,000 white voters that flipped in the Rust Belt, or poor people of color who weren't motivated.
But
it's just an obvious broader point.
I just think the broader argument is just mutating from where it was originally. I mean, obviously, I don't know if the Clinton's deplorable thing was helpful. You know, when Barack Obama said, you know, people are clinging to their guns and their God and their thing, and it was in a narrower context. He wasn't going out and doing a public speech about that. I mean, he's right. I mean, that's just demonstrably true. I mean, obviously, it's a generalization, and at the margins, there are people in these communities who are not clinging to God and gun. But there's also a lot that are.
I mean, he did lay the groundwork for some hot bars by Sarah Palin.
Hot bars?
Oh, God, I wish we had this clip. You remember when she was just like, it sounded like she was almost freestyling.
Oh, yeah. Clingin', fringin', dingin', dingin'.
Yeah.
Right, that one?
It was amazing. But I think Michael made a good point the other day, too, which is that, you know, to care about the needs of all the people who don't vote currently and just feel incredibly disenfranchised and marginalized and probably would lean progressive, there's really no difference between catering to their needs and the needs of these, you know, swing voters who might have gone for Obama and then to Trump. You know, they can come along for the ride if they want to, or maybe we're going to call their bluff and they actually are just white identitarians.
Yeah, in which case, screw them.
But I still want them to have health care.
Bitter, clinging, proud clingers.
Jesus.
That's fire.
Fred from Formerly College. I was the first caller, 203 number that got disconnected. I could hear John from San Antonio talking, although I couldn't hear you. Now I can hear Brendan and John talking, and it's nearly 4 a.m., but I'm feeling oddly dedicated right now. Well, I appreciate that. Fred is in, I believe, South Korea now. The moon in Lake Michigan. Sam, I have great deals on Klonopin. Help a guy who will have no union and no Social Security soon out. It's a DOS attack coordinated by Tim Black and Weird Mike Cernovich in order to push for a Green New Deal. Ben and Oliver. Hi, Auntie. See you soon. Don't get it. Miss NBC. I think fundamentally why coastal elite disparagement of flyover state trash is not good is because it contravenes progressive humanistic values. I want everyone to be provided in my future socialist utopia because I'm a socialist. So even fans of Trump belong in this utopia because they are human. Yes, I agree with that. Dan Stark. Riveting content. I hope he's talking about the phone thing. Ronald Reagan, who do I got to blow around here to get listed as the friend of the show on the new website? Well, that's already going to happen, buddy. But take it easy. Doe, buying lots on Amazon, but this link from new MR site not working. Missing holiday shopping advantage. Is that right? What do you mean it's not working? Oh, gosh. We just, so many. We'll check it later today. I'll try and fix it. Negro Spiritual, Sam, could you finish your thought regarding Ronald Reagan? The other day, you cut off when Michael was complimenting my Sopranos Chomsky character. I don't remember. Calling into other shows to say Ronald Reagan instead of Baba Booey. What are your ideas to replace Howard Stern's penis in the Baba Booey phrase? The only thing I come up with Ronald Reagan, Sam Cedar's rape tweet. Yeah, that might work. Sam, will you please... Hi, we got a lot of IMs here. All right, we got Gulag Greg. Sam, I'm making a fun half mixtape, and I need you to say absolutely abhorrent things you repeatedly on air in different ways. You can start whenever. Mayday Mindy. Hey, guys, small victory for us today. 6 people from the inauguration riot got off today. Not guilty. Yeah, happy holidays. Love you, Mindy. Claire, send a raven, Sam. That is, I guess, instead of the phone.
He's from the UK.
Eon Blue. Tuning in late, but you talk about Jim Jordan's coked up appearance on CNN last night?
Who's Jim Jordan? The congressman? The far-right congressman?
No. Will you look for that? See if you can find it. Moist Noises. Coastal elite is a cultural designation. We already have a term for rich assholes on the coast and mainland. Bourgeoisie. Okay. Johnny Ganja Cookie. I recently unfollowed a prominent resistance figure when she went on a victim-blaming rant about poor white folks. It was literally indistinguishable from Kevin D. Williamson piece in the National Review.
Good for you.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I appreciate it just from the standpoint of, like, it's just inappropriate. I don't know. Just broadly speaking, I don't know that you need a specific justification for it. I'm not sure. I guess my beef with the construct of what was being argued was that that's the reason why we lose. I don't think that's what
we're arguing.
Well, no, but that was the original comment. And that's why I'm saying that I think like what you guys are responding to is something different, which is that I don't think there is an electoral price to be paid. Like, I don't know that I would have said the deplorables, but I don't think that moved people.
Don't you think in such a I don't know. I just think at this point with such a small margin.
Yes, I think everything. But you can also measure the net of like how much did that motivate people to go out? I don't know.
In the absence of a positive economic program and a broadly redistributive program, I think that's where we start to see more of this culture war bullshit come to the forefront.
That's
whereas maybe it might not otherwise.
Trotsky would have won. I took a class about right-wing American populism this year, and I have a problem with the way you were setting up the problem as purely strategic failure. It's extremely to tell people to modernize, quit their old jobs, and conform to new technology-driven economy, change their entire life to survive. I feel like there's a word missing in there that I don't know exactly what you're getting at.
That is the technocratic solution to the problem of inequality.
Yeah, but I was setting up the problem as purely a strategic failure. I wasn't setting up the problem. I was responding to a comment that type of stuff, mocking on Sarah Palin is why, Trump won. And I don't buy that. Winky the Anus. Hey, I was the 503 number, but I wanted to say that I was the person that emailed suggesting you have Dr. Dixon on. Super stoked you had him on. I also want to say that I'm a graduate student. I'm always impressed with your discussion and research. Love you, Dan. You mean Dawn. I'm joking. Melissa Meaner. Have you guys read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance? Have you have any thoughts about it? I haven't read it, and I've seen some critiques, but I haven't read it. So.
I have seen critiques, and I haven't heard anything good about it.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of people I respect think it's garbage.
Hillbilly Elegy is like the white version of these sort of like a genre of writers of color who wrote like these disclosure books in the 90s of like, oh, we don't need to do anything about structural racism or inequality. We just have bad morals. It's like white people, Bill Cosby, pull your pants up stuff for like poor white people. It looks like total trash.
He's trendy Charles Murray.
Trendy Charles Murray, exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if this guy were setting himself up for some sort of political run.
Oh, no, he already, I think, said that he was moving to Ohio, I think it was, to run for office.
Oh, boy.
Yep. No, and he does and also he has the weird conservative reactionary habit of like listing other people's supposed spending habits. It's creepy, it's stupid, it's reductionist.
Not safe to drink. As a power middle class person living in Flint, Michigan, I can tell you the issue with coastal elitism is the idea that those certain coastal cities are all that matter, and everyone between is either ineffectual or don't try to matter if they can. The idea that there's nothing comes out of cities like Detroit, Chicago, and otherwise doesn't actually have enough of an effect on this country as NYC, for example. Oh, a lower middle class person, not a power middle class person. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's a certain inevitability, too, because of where the media is concentrated. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So there's always
I think that's actually the central point. I think it's not really what the liberals are doing. I think that the right has very specifically used culture as, like, where everyone's interacting in a certain space and so that's why people think Harvey Weinstein is a surrogate for the Democrats.
Right.
Like, politics or culture is where the political struggle is for a lot of people. They've been trained that way.
Well, and that is the main right wing scam of the time. That's true.
Well, I think there's also, I mean, I think part of it is, and it is, I think Jamie's right as far as like with an absence of a meaningful economic program that people believe is going to impact them, which is not, I don't think, as I mean, I think that's hard to sort of convince people of, and has always been the case because of the nature of this country in many respects. But there's, for instance, the example of that, I mean, I cited this the other day, that I can't remember the name of the book, but the communists in Alabama. You could not get white workers to organize with the communists because they were black. Bottom line, end of story. That is the reality. So it's not just that there's an absence of politics and an attempt for solidarity. There is in this country a significant a portion of people who prefer racial solidarity over economic one.
That is totally true, but then at the same time, there's also like the Wilmington coup in North Carolina, where there actually was a cross-racial Republican governance that was literally deposed, yes, in just like today, a fusion of like white supremacist violence and thuggery, but also straight-up economic interests instigating a coup to get rid of successful cross-racial governance in the Reconstruction period. So I think like the historical analogies we're looking for and which ones we choose to emphasize or not also have political implications for us. And they're not. It's not like one way or another.
Or it could also be a difference in geographies.
Yeah, and racism wasn't created in a vacuum either. I think it's been used very effectively throughout our history to divide the working class against itself. So hopefully, I mean, I think this needs to happen. Anti-racism and anti-capitalism can go hand in hand.
But this is like what Adolph Reed was saying the other day on my show. Like, you can't, the part of the reason it's so important to make these historical distinctions about the ways, and like racism is continuous, but it's not always the same thing.
Right.
Is because it manifests in very different conditions that usually do, on some level, have an economic origin. And just even practically speaking, like, this is far afield, but I remember the one thing. Remember, like, Hillary Clinton was confronted a couple times by Black Lives Matter activists, and mostly, of course, I had found her responses to be very lacking. But there was one time where they jumped, like, people criticized her. We might have even, where she kind of was telling this young woman, like, I'm not here to change hearts. I'm here to do policy. And I actually thought, like, look, I'm sure her policy is probably not as aggressive as mine would be, but I had no problem with that answer, you know. And I think part of, like, what we do when we look at it more kind of historically and economically is take it more in the realm of actual politics and economics and away from attitudes, even attitudes that are disgusting and need to be addressed, but are somewhat distinct than even like potential working relationships with people who in fact might have disgusting and stupid attitudes, but can be worked around.
Yeah, I mean, such a large proportion of our country is racist that any progressive politician is going to have racists in their coalition. Obama had racist
Plenty of racists. Look at that poll of Hillary Clinton and Trump voters who have racist attitudes about African Americans, and everybody pointed out that all these Trump voters had some stunning high number believed that African Americans were intellectually inferior. Hillary voters were not that far behind.
25%.
25% of people who voted for Hillary Clinton. That's an obscene number.
Moochie says, what? Hi, Sam and MR crew. As a former friend of MR in the Occupy days, do you have any thoughts on Jamie Kilstein's reappearance in public? His reincarnation on Joe Rogan and the Modern Day Philosophers comedy podcast seems to be as somebody who's now doing real comedy instead of political comedy, not to mention being described on Rogan as an ex-male feminist. Assuming that means he's an ex-feminist rather than an ex-male. Personally, it bugs me that he's now shitting on political comedy as an art form in order to justify his own career move, necessitated by his own mistakes and hypocrisy, saying political comedy isn't real comedy, that kind of thing. I mean, I haven't heard that much of it, to be honest with you. I saw one clip of Jamie on Joe Rogan's. You know, I mean, I think he wants to be a comedian, and making that move from sort of like getting a little bit less political is sometimes difficult. I don't know. I haven't spent that much time thinking about it, to be honest with you. I mean,
I took her to the vegan cafe, and I moved on her very heavily.
He seemed to. I mean, I think he had some real problems.
I think his beef. I mean, I remember I read some. I mean, I think that he got sort of drummed out of where he was in a way that was kind of ridiculous. But I mean, my mean assessment, to be honest, with the people in the fun half, is I wasn't super impressed with Jamie when he was a lefty vegan guy, and I'm not super impressed with him now.
Can we recap who this guy is for people who might not know?
He was a co-host on Citizens Radio, and he and his ex-wife. They had a pretty good show. I mean, I didn't listen to it that much.
She still does it.
Yes, and oh my God, I'm just having a brain fart right now, and I can't remember her name. Allison Kilkenny, and she's actually, I think, a very good journalist. And
she's smart.
And so there was a huge controversy about, I don't know, they had a weird, I guess, like a marital relationship and then like it got sort of went crossways with like people who worked for the show or were friends of the show. And I to be honest with you, I didn't dig into the the details of it, and so I think he had some some emotional issues, and it sort of like disappeared for a while, and then has come back as, you know, he's not doing political comedy anymore, and he's going to try and do more straight comedy. And, you know, from a comedian's perspective, I know that, like, you know, there has always been a disdain for political comedy. It's not, it relies on people cheering for what you're saying rather than laughing at what you're saying.
So very rare that you can synthesize both things. Thank you.
Bob Flav. First time using the app for Android since the end of AIM. Using the app through PC. Hope this works. It does, Bob. It does. Mute caller. Sam, hot bars, best old man in the room moment 2017.
Don't get it.
Hot bars?
What are hot bars, like in a commissary?
Sexy liberal. I used to listen to and love both Pod Save America and The Majority Report. Is there something wrong with me? I listen to and love both.
Yeah.
Wayne Lynch. I to be honest with you, Pod Save America could be great.
We used to work at President Obama. We worked for President Obama, and when we were with President Obama, like one of the things that President Obama said was like, really got to reach out. Like we had Evan McMullen on. He was like, look, I don't agree that we should drop a nuke on Lebanon and then collaborate with Al Qaeda and completely dismantle the welfare state and the Ryan plan. But, you know, he worked for the CIA and he doesn't use the N-word. So this is like the type of guy that we can collaborate with.
Eight more IMs. Let's go. All right. Wayne Lynch, going to mail you a cup and string from UK. Want to talk to you, but your leader has imposed the removal of net neutrality. That's why your phones don't work. Jay Tingle. Speak for yourself. I'm in the middle of the power middle class. Now go get me a Diet Coke. I was on hold before to talk about what's the matter with Alabama. The patter was pretty lively between John and Kyle. I also learned that Reagan was on hold for 37 minutes. On the matter of Alabama, Sean King tweeted this: now that a few people tell me they believe Doug Jones, who was propelled to victory by nearly unanimous black support, is likely to appoint an all-white senior staff. He feels burdened to appeal to conservatives in Alabama, they say. Don Cheadle says the senator-elect told him otherwise.
See, this is the problem with the Democratic Party. Like, he won. He can do whatever he wants. And he's still trying to pander to these people who are never going to support him.
Oh, and also even more cynically, I mean, look, he won and he's already thinking about re-election. But his path to victory is African-American and whatever few like liberal-ish to moderate-ish voters in Alabama, they're like, it's insane.
Well, it's also weird to me that people would care what is, like, white people would say, oh, you got a black person on, now I'm not going to vote like for you. That just seems bizarre to me.
It also may be, I mean, I don't know. It may also be a function of like constituencies that all white constituencies that he's appealing to, that it's not just a question of I'm going to staff my people this way, but I guess we got to wait and see. But yeah, it's stupid, and there should be pushback. Obviously, I mean it's dumb electorally. It's also wrong in terms of like it's 2017. Sam, I really think people might be underestimating the damage 4 years of Trump will do to the country and the world. How far does it go before we don't come back? I think 8 years would be devastating, and 4 years I think is pretty bad. I mean, aside from like, it's bad if you, at this point, the year that you've gone through, if you are a dreamer or an immigrant or DAPA potential recipient, it is bad if you, I think, you are Muslim or you are in, anyone from a vulnerable community. It's going to be bad for the environment. But the long-term damage, again, is the judges. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I mean, everything else can be dialed back on some level. The human suffering can't be replaced, but it can be alleviated in certain circumstances. But left is lost. Of all the shit Trump said during the campaign, it was Hillary's deplorable comment that pushed people off the edge. Come on, people. Left is European. The regional election in Catalonia has just ended. Exit poll indicate a majority for the Separatist Party. Nick from Manitoba, thinking of doing a history master's on geopolitics. Any topic suggestions? Geopolitics, I would just do. Ian Baltimore, do you have to adopt lifestyles to get destroyed by technology? There's no uninventing the sewing machine. So if your solution isn't retraining moving people, your solution is lying to them. Billy Buckner, do liberals not care what happens between coasts, or are we the nanny state with prescriptions for everything?
Both?
Axel from Fort Worth. Please, Jamie, come on TMBS. Triangle Bill. Hi, Sam and crew. This is Bill in North Carolina. I just wanted to say thank you for producing the best show on the intertubes and all your hard work. Best wishes for all the holidays. Be safe. See y'all in 2018. By the way, we're working hard in North Carolina to build the resistance and flip as many districts, state, and Congress from red to progressive blue. Also, the new website looks great. My uncle lives in North Carolina now. He grew up in western New York. He was a Republican, sort of classic suburban Republican. He has moved to North Carolina, and he's like, I am no longer a Republican. He's just like, the Republicans here are very different than the Republicans in New York State.
But are they really?
I don't, that.
Overtly.
This is what I did not say to him.
Back to those
This is what I did not say to him. The difference is there's less of them. That's the difference. They don't have the ability. They are constrained.
The social confidence.
They are constrained. Maybe socially they may function similarly, but they are constrained by the presence of not conservatives.
And perhaps there's something different about their manner or their affect.
No, it's that he's sit there and he's watched like the North Carolina legislature like actively disenfranchise people in a way that you don't see Republicans do in New York. But that's because they don't have the ability to do that in New York.
There's your fucking opportunity.
Republicans did this the moment they had the majority in these houses. And so, all right, 2 more IMs. 3. Calvin, BW, quick summary. He had an open relationship, had sex with some fans, tried to have sex with some fans, got hate on Twitter, went into seclusion, now is anti-SJW.
Which makes,
Jamie.
that is basically what happened. And in his like little narrow slice of the world, it makes total sense. But I think look, he's a nice guy, but the same like really shallow moves he made with his like toxic SJW stuff, he's kind of doing now, I think in some ways, in another way. But as a person, from what I saw of the Rogan interview, he seems a little more balanced.
Moby Dog, any chance you think Al Franken will return to the airwaves now that he won't have to pull any punches? I don't know about that.
Welcome back. It's Alpha Al Franken. Get ready for the pictures. Sign a permission slip. I'm grabbing your ass before the party.
He is going to rebrand himself as some kind of MRA.
I gotta go.
Mark my words.
Final IM of the day. Hey, girl, I can't get my audio right. Sorry. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, I can't get my audio right, but swipe right, and I'll tell you all about Medicare and Medicaid. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.